Heiner, how goes? Where are you, Heiner? You're still on mute? Okay, you're not on mute anymore. Kannst du mich hören?
Ich kann dich hören. Und du?
Ja. Sehr klar.
Why are you already recording?
I always record. That way we can get the small talk.
Small talk recording.
How do you say small talk? Is it the kleine Sprache or what do you, how do you talk? How do you say it?
Geschwätz, Quatschen.
Die Schwätz quatschen. Quatschen, I recognize.
Schwatzen oder Geschwätz?
Schwatzen or Geschwätz? Okay.
Das Schwatzen. Die schwatzen miteinander.
Okay. I just learned something. Thank you. What does your t-shirt say?
Can you read?
Reach for liberty. Peace.
Peace, love, liberty.
Okay, good. Excellent. Ah, there we go. Barry is here. I will make you co-host. There is Glenn. Hello, Barry.
Hello.
Hey, Glenn. And there is. By the way, any of you attend Thursday or Friday this week?
Yes, I did both.
Yeah, since we're not fully in on it, yeah, I'd just like to get a sense of what's going on in the other locations. Okay. I always work during the week.
I think Heiner and Teese were in. Were you in both of them? Both of you guys? Teese was not, but I think Heiner was.
What?
We talked about an issue that is recurring, at least for me, and maybe for other people, hidden agendas, rackets, and charades, dealing with people who were engaged in these practices of having hidden agendas, rackets, and charades. And once you figure them out, which takes a while, then now what do you do?
Was it regarding specific people?
Yes, but we didn't actually mention any specific examples. We kind of, you know, the rule of the game is you don't talk about people who aren't there, but you talk about the phenomenon kind of in the abstract, in general. And everybody knows examples, but you don't actually mention the names of the examples.
Okay. All right. So just out of curiosity then, does anyone here feel that that is an issue in barn raising? Are there people operating with hidden agendas that we need to address?
I certainly have more to think and say about it and resolve about it, but maybe other people have talked out about it by now. I don't know.
I'm not talking about in general. I'm talking about specifically in barn raising.
Oh.
Do we have a hidden agendas issue?
Let me just say something, because otherwise we immediately go into the issue of Barry.
Yep.
I will probably fall again asleep. I was in the session before 2 times dozing off like this. The whole schedule and the issues, not only in GCC, but in these Zoom conversations, are a little bit too much for me. I was not even ready to press the right button to show my slides in the session before. And I'm very concerned. It's my age, but it's also the sleeplessness and the expectations and assumptions we have. But we don't know each other. We don't know about the situation. I, in the last weeks, talked with some people, said, well, it's also too much for me. And that's why I only talk to real people, except I go to GCC. And for people like me, who are very much in various environments, and I have duties there, it is not just fun, it is something we really have to consult with ourselves. Are we just misinterpreting these persons? Do we have a totally different vocabulary? Or can we really subject that these people have hidden agendas when they are maybe just in another world, as I said, with a two-dimensional individual meeting in the three-dimensional world. So I think we have a very steep challenge here, and really learning from each other. This recording very often prohibits, because when I tell about my real situation, I mean, which is really making pain for me in my life or for my neighbors and family, then it doesn't belong to a public record. Otherwise, the people will not really speak about themselves. And then we have the situation that we have members who already left and others where we really don't know the circumstances and what kind of vocabulary they have. I had that in a session with Barry recently. He said, well, you pronounce so strangely, it's one word, and then I don't understand the whole sentence or what you mean. For me, it's 3 words in every 3 sentences. So these are real things we have to consider. And as I really have to sleep, I will take my camera off and I will listen to you and maybe wake up.
Tees, and then me. I do have a response also, Tees.
I have no response, but I just say the hidden agenda, which is for me not hidden anymore because I was able to speak last Saturday, that it's for me introducing mathematics and medical sciences more and more, and then seeing that the TU Delft is picking it up. So even the academic research in epidemics, which was actually somewhere on the record somewhere, now has been picked up by the TU Delft. It was announced publicly. So this is one of the hidden agendas that was in me and that I was steering within my country, and it landed. So it's happening in a good sense. But this has been happening since 2004. So it took so long time and much thinking and just doing, say, 3 actions at the right time, at the right moment. So this is a hidden agenda. So I was not able to speak before, and now I see at the moment, I didn't know even before that May would be the month that this would come out. So even this week, again, TU Delft comes with a new initiatives combining technical engineering or mathematics, and then combining it with medical ideas. So this is what I wanted, and this is hidden agenda. So you wanted to know about hidden agenda, so this is what I wanted to say.
I appreciate that. I'll respond to that after I respond to Heiner. Hopefully Heiner has not fallen asleep yet. Heiner, I'm actually kind of curious about 2 apparently conflicting rules. Okay, there's one rule, which I've heard is in practice at every session other than perhaps this one, which is we don't talk about people who are not here. Okay, now if that rule is applied, then the issue you have with recording your personal story, I'm curious whether or not that really applies, because if you're really not talking about people who are not there, you would still speak in the abstract. You would say maybe perhaps my relative or my acquaintance or whatever. You would use some pronoun like that. On the other hand, if you don't embrace this rule, that we don't talk about people who are not here. And by the way, on the record, I do not embrace that rule. I think that that's overly restrictive, okay? But I'm complying with that rule, so I'm not going to any of the other sessions anymore because that rule seems to be in place, okay? So If we do talk about people, so let's say someone has a wife or has a girlfriend or has a boss or has, an arch nemesis, and they name those people here, okay, as this is the person who's causing me grief, okay? We also here, and I should write this up, I've been verbal on this many, many times, can still say, let's not share this publicly. I still believe there is value in recording and sharing it privately among those of us who are here. I don't see any issue with that, and I don't think that's ever been violated to my knowledge, okay? So I still think that it can be recorded and shared among us. Now, if there is a problem sharing it among us, even though it's agreed that we keep it private, if that is the problem, then I think there's a different issue at work. The issue is, do you want to stand behind your statements? Do you actually want to own your words? And if you stand behind your statements and if you want to own your words, there should be no issue, right? So those are the three thoughts I have in response to what you just said. So I'm hoping you're still awake, Heiner, okay? And before I relinquish the floor, let me respond to Thies. My word to Thies is, Thies, congratulations. I know you said years ago or many, many months ago, you said something would happen in May of 2021. And I said, great, let's wait till May of 2021. You can have one of these sessions. You can tell us all about it. So that invitation is still open, Thies. I really hope you take advantage of that. And then the second thought on you is, I don't think necessarily that's what I understand as a hidden agenda. It may be a not often discussed agenda. It may be something that you're doing that you just don't talk about. To me, I don't consider that a hidden agenda. To me, a hidden agenda implies something that's not stated, that is really kind of working at cross purposes of the stated agenda or the group agenda. So to me, there's nothing malicious about what you were doing. And in fact, you mentioned it, once before, at least to me. So I don't consider that in the category of hidden agenda, just personally myself, okay? So anyway, Heiner, I hope you remember what I said, and congratulations, Thies. And oh, by the way, we have yet to go into check-ins, and then I have 2 or 3 different topics that we might want to bring up. But anyway, Stacy, I was asking what happened in Thursday and Friday, and Barry was talking about the fact that the topic of hidden agendas came up. So we were just spending a few minutes on that for now, okay? And that's me, over and out for now.
I'm looking forward to watching the first 10 minutes.
See, Heiner, that's why we record. Glenn. Oh,
Yeah,
Heiner. There you go. Now we got Heiner's tongue on record. Okay. Heiner, would you like to respond or reply to anything I said? I'll leave it to you and Glenn.
I already replied.
Okay.
Uh,
Good. I'm
Sam,
glad you're very honest and candid about your response. May I ask Heiner a question? Heiner, do you embrace the rule that we do not talk about people who are not here? Do you embrace that rule?
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so why would then the issue of talking about your personal issues be, let's say, more difficult or blocked?
I have no problems with my personal issues and my authenticity.
Yeah.
But I feel we don't really learn the deep contexts and situations other peoples are in. And as we know that we interpret and have a certain cultural semantic vocabulary, we make a lot of wrong guesses or assumptions, and we really get appalled. I have seen it in really conflict situations where the people are about to kill themselves or have killed themselves or others in really tough situations when even money was involved. So I just wanted to say it has its pros and its cons to be recorded. And I feel there is a personality thing which you cannot really, well, you can try to do it in one and once, And we tried with Tammy to do it in something like Inquisition, we called it with Tammy and Fleming, that you really present yourself and the situation of certain people. And living situations are always different. And so you have to take them in account and not assume from your position what the other persons might have in mind. We are totally living in Venus and Mars, or Ares and Aphrodite, very often in different universes or on different planets. And that is what is difficult when not everybody is ready for appreciation rounds, or doesn't like it at all, or he doesn't like to be on a hot seat, because it's burning, I tell you, a hot seat. Have you been with the witches in the medieval age? Have you been burned?
Honestly, I didn't understand that.
Okay,
Can you translate, Glenn?
well, I think one thing I consider this a bit, because I'm sort of, my original attitude was very pro recording, and I still, see many benefits of it. Obviously, you can watch. I mean, there's huge benefits for sure. But I think it is correct that it's more difficult to get to know one another on a more personal level when it's being recorded. There's, subconsciously you're speaking to an audience. It's a little bit more like a show in a sense. And so, yeah, it's a subtle little difference, which maybe shouldn't be underestimated. So I think that it's the optimal way for community like this. I think is a combination of some recorded sessions and some non-recorded sessions. But the main reason that I mostly show up here is during the week. I'm always on the road, and it's sort of difficult to participate in the right way, I feel. And of course, some days I could have been more active, but I don't know. It's a strange day for me. One session like this, it's stimulates so many thoughts, and sort of have to let it sink a little bit. So my problem is an interesting question, just with hidden agendas, because it's like I kind of have a hidden agenda. It's like very big ideas, very, very big ideas, and it's a little bit difficult to really know how to begin. And so that's why I'm sort of figured out I have to just move very slowly with all of this, whatever this is, and just see it more like a 10-year, 20-year project or something. And that is, of course, I mean, my view of it is quite similar to this, but emphasis on sense making, co-visioning, co-creation, those kind of things, understanding and learning. And but I think it's an important point that the personal sharing is probably very important, and maybe something is missing if it doesn't happen. So yeah. Anyway, yeah. Besides that, today I'm just here, no special purpose. So
Okay.
But that was an interesting question with hidden agendas. It just sort of made me ponder, do I have any, I mean, there's a lot of things that I don't speak about, obviously, that I'm thinking about, but that I don't speak with many people about. So, and it's just an interesting question. So I'll just let that question
Right.
be alive.
All right. Thank you, Glenn. I have a little bit more understanding, but maybe not yet 100%. So unless anybody else would like to translate, I'd like to suggest that we either wrap up this section on hidden agendas, because I just was curious about what was going on the rest of the week, or if you want, we can carry it forward a little bit more. The other option is to do a round of check-ins, and then after that, I did come with some prepared thoughts for how we want to discuss things today, or any other topic people want to bring up. I am aware, let's see, this is the 22nd, so I think it's the, what is it, the 15th, 8th, 1st. So this is the 4th Saturday, surprisingly, even though it's the 22nd. So in theory, I was going to share this particular Saturday, and anybody else could volunteer to moderate and focus us. I didn't get any, other than perhaps Barry, who says he can go at any time. So that's the only thing on the backlog, unless anybody else wants to step forward. So we can go those number of ways. Barry could take the session, or I could take the session with my prepared questions, or we could talk about hidden agendas, or we could still nominate other topics. And have at it, and I still have a response to Glenn and Heiner at some point. And welcome, Alex. Welcome, Colin.
Sam, I just have a quick question for you on an open item from Zulip. You were considering publishing a particular video that had not been published, and my question is, what's the status of that decision?
Yeah, I think that's the October, what, 24th video?
Yeah, that weekend. I forget it's 24th or 25th.
Right. And I don't remember whether or not, okay, just, and I know I'm on the record here, I don't remember whether we had agreed to not publish it or whether I was just behind and didn't do it. And so I've shared it with those people who were in attendance on October 24th to say, hey, is there any evidence there that we said we wouldn't publish this? And so far, nobody's come forth and said, I found some evidence that we wouldn't publish this. So I'm inclined to publish it, but I myself have not reviewed it carefully yet. So unless anybody objects, I'm about to share it more publicly. But that was the status of it. You know, there's nothing about hidden agendas there. It's just a matter of, I haven't had time to go back and review that whole video. That's all.
Did you determine who was in it and who was not in it?
I myself have not done that.
Oh,
No, I did. That's why I was able to say, I'll share it with these specific 7 or 8 or 9.
Right, that's what I wanted to clarify.
So those
Did you in
people
fact-
were contacted individually and given a link and said, do you want to review this video? So,
And since I wasn't in that list, can I reliably conclude that I was not present for that session?
if you were not invited, then you probably were not in that session, because I believe I tried to send it to everyone in that session whom I had contact information for.
Right, yeah, that agrees with my recollection. I was not in that session. But I wanted to sort of resolve that, and the only way to formally resolve it is to see the session, but I can't see it if I'm not in it and I don't have permission, or I can't. You know, I
Well,
don't
let me
have
go
permission.
back to the people who were in that session
Right.
and ask them whether they're willing to share with you, not the entire public, but just with
Right.
you. Okay, so let me at
And
least
ask them if they will share it with me too, because I believe sounds familiar to me, the not publishing.
Okay,
Right.
all right. So I will ask those 2 questions and then we'll move forward from there.
I don't necessarily have to see it as long as there's solid evidence that I wasn't even there.
I can look at the Zoom data because Zoom always splits out exactly who was there given the audio tracks. So if you're not in the audio track, I can safely conclude that you were not there.
Okay.
I could do a little investigation if you want, and later today
That would
I'll
be
let you
great,
know what I found.
Because,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, that would be great. That would
Okay.
be-
I'll let you know what I find out.
Cool. All right. Alex, you had your finger up?
Yeah, checking in, and I noticed Barry's coffee cup's bigger than mine, so I have an issue there. But
Coffee cup envy.
this question of agendas that we seem to be leaving behind or pushing aside is cool, because we all have, if we can remember this thing, we all have our own innate agenda, whether it be our family, our hobbies, or our interests, whatever it is, or our business. It's our agenda, and if you're open about it and it stands up to the litmus test, then it usually is acceptable by most people. Otherwise, they'll reject it because they'll look upon it as being spam or clickbait or something undesirable. So I just thought I'd put that on the table. And it's good to be here with you all. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Anybody else want to check in? Going once.
Hello.
Hey, Kayla.
I do.
Hey.
You guys will see my face soon. I just wanted to say hello. It's been a while. I just got back from hiking. I actually organized a group hike early in the morning, and it was successful. So I'm happy to participate and happy to be here. And that's it.
Okay. Welcome.
Got a couple of brief, just two things came to my mind. One is there could be a hidden agenda that's even hidden for yourself. So that's interesting. That, like, maybe deep inside, I'm pursuing a certain direction, which the rational mind can't quite comprehend and certainly can't explain. So that's one thing. And also you mentioned this rule of not talking about people who aren't here. It doesn't sound like that has been the rule. It's more the rule that you don't speak negatively about people who are not here. That sounds like a pretty reasonable principle, I think, in most situations. But I've never experienced that anyone has any problems by, referring to somebody else and say that this person has done some interesting work on this and this subject. Or
exactly.
Yeah, so that's obviously, I think it's more with, when you speak about negative things or say embarrassing things or something, you kind of want to be a little considerate. So, but I mean, I don't think of it as much as a rule, as sort of just common sense and sort of being, considerate, I guess. So, but anyway, that's interesting, this hidden agenda. It's hidden even to myself. Yeah. I've been thinking about this quite a lot. It's a complex issue.
It is.
Okay, Barry?
Yeah,
or Stacy?
Yeah, I would like to continue this discussion. First, I just want to say that the reason I was late is because I got into, I was on a Facebook chat where let's see, how do I explain it? A Black person was explaining how their manager had come to them to make a request having to do with diversity. And the other Black people on the page all agreed that the way the situation occurred was awkward and shouldn't have happened. And, I found it necessary to point out as a white person that me looking at it, I saw good intention. So even though it may have been awkward, a white person may not realize that was awkward because it's what's called like a microaggression. And it's just, we can only think from our own point of view. We can try, but that's not a normal way of being, or that would be one neurotic person that's only thinking about what's going on in everybody else's mind. So, I wanted to have, and that was a difficult conversation. I wound up, when I realized how late it was, I wound up not going on to my next comment because I didn't want to be rushed. But again, this whole idea of it does tie into agendas and hidden agendas and not knowing what's someone's intent is. So to me, the word agenda even has some sort of negative connotation, although I don't think it should. And the word hidden, maybe, you know, there's a difference between purposely kept hidden or just not announced and specified. So there's a lot of nuance in this conversation. And I have to tell you, when I came onto it, not knowing what you were talking about, the energy was really, I mean, if I spoke another language, I would ask you, and I didn't know what you were talking about at all, I would ask you, Sam, were you accused of something? Because that energy that was coming out of you, it really sounded like you were trying to defend yourself. Did anybody else feel that was here? I see people nodding their head a little bit.
Just trying
if
to cover
they
his
agree.
tracks. I don't know.
It's not a bad thing, but let's be honest about it.
No, I don't feel accused of anything. I was just trying to make my own position clear.
No, but I guess I'm asking Teese because he was nodding his head, and Glenn, if it seemed that Sam was a little overly animated in a way that might seem like he was feeling accused of something.
I didn't do it. I didn't do it.
Teese?
I did not feel anything about some, but it enticed me to react. So something came through, but not as strong as you are saying. So it just enticed me to react, that's all.
I kind of had this feeling with Sam. There's always like some strong feeling underneath the surface, under a sort of calm, composed way of behaving, but there's always an emotion underneath it, which is sort of a characteristic thing.
I hide my inner crybaby. Okay.
Barry?
I just want to recall maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I remember Sam asked in one of Doug's sessions about this issue of whether it's okay or not okay to talk about somebody who's not here. And Doug said it's absolutely verboten in his session and said that's a fiat, at which point Sam left the meeting. Now, whether there's a cause and effect there, I shrug, but I observe that.
Yes, Barry is correct. I chose at that moment to depart because I've been on the record many times saying it's too restrictive. That rule feels too restrictive to me. That means I can't talk about Trump. I can't talk about Biden. I can't talk about my ex-wife. I can't talk about Colin if he's not here. I can't talk about. So I think that's way too restrictive. So I am not on board with embracing this rule that says you cannot talk about people when they're here. I think that responsibly, as Glenn said, use your judgment. For me, stating facts is not an issue, right? Now, if you're dubious about whether that's a fact, you better be careful and use your judgment. But stating things that can be corroborated, where there is evidence for some statement that you've said, I don't consider that an issue at all. And I don't think it needs to be only positive things that you say about people, even anonymously. I think if it's factual and somebody wants to take it negatively and it's still corroborated by evidence, that should be on the record. I'm comfortable going on the record with those facts completely, okay? So that's my position on this. And that may be some of the energy that came across because I do disagree with Doug on that. And I've told them very, very directly. But if he chooses to make that a fiat dictate within the groups that he moderates, then I probably won't find myself in those groups very often. I may choose to go sometimes just to poke my head in, and maybe I'll comply, maybe I'll not, but you know, I don't want to necessarily provoke that. So mostly I stay away. Stacy.
Yeah, so I don't get the sense that Doug's as strict about that as maybe you do, because I often
very
will
strict
say,
about the wording. He was very strict about the wording.
Yes.
well, he's precise in the wording.
Yes.
There's a difference. I've often said, oh, on Saturday, Sam was there, and, I've never gotten chastised for reporting something like that. But take, for example, that you left as you did, but let's say you left because you had to walk the dog or for whatever reason, and somebody else went on the call and say, Sam just left, he's pissed. That's not fair to you. And I think that's the kind of thing that Doug's talking about, to not be speaking about people, to not be interpreting what people meant or did when they're not present, to say, no, that's not what happened.
Okay.
And
can I
that's
respond?
exactly what I did. That's exactly what I did.
Can I respond to that?
Good.
Okay. I think it's entirely fair to me. Okay. Anybody can make an interpretation on my behavior. I do not forbid that. I welcome that. On the other hand, what anybody does, if they interpret my behavior, that is a reflection of that person, not of me.
Well, you know what? That's very nice to say so, but somebody else watching that doesn't know you is going to think, what a crybaby, or whatever. I don't think that's fair.
Yeah. See, it doesn't matter to me. If somebody wants to base their view of me based on a third party's misinterpretation of me, then that person's ability to think clearly is, in my view, not very good. So if that's the way they want to make a judgment about me based on some flippant remark from a third party based on a very small act, then that's a person I don't care about. I don't care about their reaction to me.
And that's a fair statement for you, but maybe Glenn doesn't feel that way, or maybe I don't feel that way, or somebody else doesn't feel that way. And, I'm sorry, Glenn.
Yeah, it just came to my mind that I think there's a very important distinction here. Now I think we're almost getting into a really big, interesting topic.
Yeah,
But,
this is a good topic, actually.
But well, first of all, one distinction is between saying something factual or neutral versus saying something that assumes something about a person's intention. So that's one distinction, right? That you mentioned, Stacey. But then there's also, I think this is a very big one. I don't even know if I can explain it clearly, but it's like there's one rule for me and there's one rule for the others. And what I mean by that is that I would prefer not to make any judgments that are negative about other people's intentions. And I wouldn't recommend this. And I could also imagine that there could be a specific session where the moderator wants to have this as a rule. In this session, we do not make any judgments about a person's intentions, certainly not negative, but maybe none at all. So that's one issue. But the issue, whether somebody else does it, it's sort of a different issue. And then, Sam's attitude, I think it's a good attitude that, that's on them. If they want to make assumptions about me. And I think this principle is a very interesting principle because you can really apply it to all kinds of behaviors. That's, I want to behave in a certain way. And there's changes in the situation for sure, but let's say certain principles, right? And but that's my thing, right? And when others do differently, they have a whole different story that I know nothing about. So just because I want to enforce that rule for myself, that certainly doesn't imply that I want to, criticize others for doing differently. So it's almost like it's a different standard that I want to have for my own behavior as compared to the others. I want to have a high standard for my own behavior and just have very little expectations of other people and just, take them as they are. And this is a big topic, but I think that is a very interesting sort of an attitude to this issue, which might be a kind of a solution, to many of these questions about rules and agreements of certain behaviors. It's like, I want to behave in a certain way, but with others, they do what they do, and it's kind of none of my business.
Right.
Is that a hidden agenda? I'm just wondering. Not really.
No, well,
That's not hidden.
No, I'm
I think
more
that's-
thinking about behaviors, I think, here.
Behaviors are
Well,
not
just
just-
trying to wrap it to agendas, but sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Well, I don't like the word rules, but guidelines I think are important so that everybody in the group has an idea of what's expected, and the fact that we're discussing, they also know the reasons why. There's been too many situations that I've had in my life where people have come to me and told me something that has gone down, but they didn't speak up to make that correction, because it is uncomfortable. And I've been in that uncomfortable position so many times where I forced myself to speak up and say, no, that's not what happened. This is what happened. And I do that, but I don't always want to be the one to have to do it. And unfortunately, there are not enough people that will do it. So I just think it's better to have the guideline that that's frowned upon in the first place, so that when somebody does it, it's really, after weighing all the facts, there's a reason. It's not just a way of being.
Okay. May I go? And then Alex? And then Barry? Okay. So I actually want to go back to this point about whether somebody makes a misinterpretation of my departure from unblocking a couple weeks ago, okay? To me, if that person actually concludes that I'm a crybaby or I'm a, sop or whatever, to me, that's actually doing me a favor, okay? They basically take themselves out of consideration of communicating with me or collaborating with me. And therefore, I get to focus on people who are actually more, let's say, generous with their interpretation or well-meaning or, already well-connected. So if somebody is so willing to have one fractional second event with another fractional event misinterpretation, make their complete judgment about my character that way, they're doing me a service by removing themselves from my world of interaction. That's an efficiency thing, okay? Now, on the other hand, if there's about a whole bunch of other evidence that they could actually look at, and then they balance that and say, yeah, well, that was misinterpreted, then they would get back to me and we would have a nice conversation about that. That would be great, okay? But if that's the only thing they want to base their judgment about me on, and they take themselves away from consideration of collaboration with me, to me, that's doing me a service. That's actually doing me a favor. That's the way I look at it. Yeah, Stacy.
So let's take.
Oh, wait. I
situation-
think
This really
Alex-
follows what you said. So if anybody doesn't, who's next? I'll ask their
Alex,
permission.
I think, was next.
Alex, can I jump in for a second, please? Thank you. Take the situation you just said. Let's say a woman shows up to GCC. She's pretty new to the group and she winds up leaving, and comments are made about why she left, okay? Nobody really knows her. Nobody checks it out. Now, in another conversation one time, somebody mentions a project that's going on that she might be good for, and somebody else says, oh, she's very thin-skinned, blah, blah, blah. And nobody's going to do the legwork to find out. So that person just gets discounted. And I think that's unfair.
Okay, well, I will respond then, since the protocol now is to respond directly to the point at hand, which I think is actually unfortunate because Alex has been waiting for a while.
So
and
let
very
Alex
motivated,
go.
okay? No, because I
Let
want to respond to
Alex
your
go.
point.
We both
because
made
you
her.
wanted to respond to my point, okay? And that is, if we choose to behave so irresponsibly and let quick, flash judgments like that dismiss, from consideration certain people, then we, the group, suffer. I want people to actually be more responsible with their behavior and their interpretations and their statements. And so that's why I do think people should be held accountable for what they say and how they interpret things, okay? And if I see somebody that says, oh, XYZ came here for 3 seconds and then left, and somebody says, oh, that person is thin-skinned, I'll say, well, what are you basing that on? That one little incident? I would not be so flip as just to accept that. So I do not do that personally, myself. So anyway, that's my response to what you just said. But I do appreciate you saying that, because I do think there is that phenomenon. And I myself am not in the agenda of collaborating with everyone. To me, that is not a high intent. I'm going to collaborate with people that I can effectively collaborate with. So if people want to filter themselves out by doing certain behaviors that I find non-optimal, to me, that's doing me a service. And them a service, that I don't bother them. Alex, you've been waiting for a while. And then Barry.
Yeah, well, okay. It's this hidden agenda topic comes up a lot. And if somebody has genuinely got a hidden agenda, after a while, I think to most people, it'll become clear. But if you've got a project you're doing that's not hidden, and you mention it sometime and somebody jumps on you and you react, right? Instead of responding, they will say you've got a thin skin. Or they might use that attribution. But one example, one incident doesn't equal a trend. You know what I mean? One example doesn't equal a trend. Just because sometimes we get upset or we get our emotions hurt and we react negatively, doesn't mean we're like that all the time. It means that you've hit on something sensitive. You've touched on something close to the core. Over.
I think Barry was next, and then Colin, and then just want to reflect for the record, hidden agenda is in the spreadsheet.
Yeah, I put it in about a week or so ago. And so I just repasted it verbatim from Sam's glossary Google Doc for those who don't want to go look at it. I wanted to look back though to some remarks from Glenn about 15 minutes ago, because he was talking about hidden agendas and whether people could rationalize, and use the word rationalize. And I wanted to draw a distinction, first of all, between a hobby horse, which is kind of what Alex is talking about. People have hobby horses. They're pet topics. They like to bring them up every chance they get, but it's not hidden. Everybody knows that people have their pet projects. They like to mention them and publicize them and talk them up and invite people to join them. That's not a hidden agenda. Maybe off topic, maybe tangential and diversion, but it's not hidden. Then a hidden agenda is something that's never been announced, never revealed, but it's something that somebody keeps coming back to in a roundabout way without announcing or disclosing it or claiming it as the topic of discussion. It's tangential, out of context. But in terms of rationalizing, there's a very interesting intermediate case. And this is what Glenn was alluding to, where a person has a hidden agenda, but doesn't even appreciate that they're working from a hidden agenda. And in that case, there's a term that anybody who's been to the forum may have heard this term, and the term is racket. And one of the things they do in a forum is they say, can you reveal your racket? So a racket is an activity that you do that's like a hidden agenda. It draws people in, it entices people into something that you want to do, but kind of for nefarious reasons, not to have a conversation that's fair, but to have a lopsided exchange where the person with the racket is gaining everything and the person who's drawing in is gaining nothing. They're wasting their time. And so it's a one-sided, lopsided transaction. And I think in terms of hidden agendas and hobby horses, this issue of identifying, recognizing, and exposing rackets is a really powerful, important idea, but it's difficult to do because it's got to do with psychology and theory of mind. And how do you even know that you're on the right track if you suspect the hidden agenda? What you have is the evidence that one person is gaining what they want, everybody else is losing, being a block from having, getting their, fur rubbed. And so I think part of the thing was recognizing not just hidden agendas, but rackets. And then having recognized them, what the hell do you do about that situation unless you have a working hypothesis to that effect? And that's the unanswered question, at least for me. And I haven't heard anybody articulate a suggestion of a best practice with regard to hidden agendas and rackets.
I have a suggestion, value and ignore. Mentioned before, could be an approach that you try to value what you can find of value, and then you just sort of ignore the rest. Yeah, just a suggestion. Might also, apply to those situations.
Yeah. By the way, I just pasted in the definition of racket, because when I put in hobby horse and hidden agenda, I also felt I needed to define racket. So, and that's, as I understand it from the forum where I first learned the word.
Yeah, other groups call them stories. What is your story in double quotes? You know,
Why
and
is
other
that a
people call them
racket?
patterns. Other people call them triggers. They all kind of
Yeah.
orbit the same space. And by the way, let me say something as a non-native US American, okay? I came from overseas, so I had to learn English as a second language, okay? So to me, semantic quibbling about specific terms, to me, seems unnecessary. There's always an approximation that a term takes to whatever it is you actually intended. So, you know, the fact that one person gets triggered by one term and another person doesn't, and yet a different term will trigger them differently, to me, that's just language. That's just culture, okay? And for those words to be such blocks to communication, to me seems unnecessary, you know? I can say, well, I get triggered by the word presencing, let's just say, okay? And somebody else may not. Somebody else may say, let's be meditative, or let's be serene, or let's be, you know, generous, you know, whatever. You know, I can choose to say, that word doesn't actually mean what I think it means, but as long as I can use another notion and have it fit the situation, I don't need to make a big point of it, okay? I don't need to always say, oh, well, you use this word, I'm triggered, therefore I'm going to derail the entire conversation because now I'm taken away from my prefrontal cortex, I'm living in my amygdala, therefore the entire group has to suffer. No, to me, I have to use, in my opinion, better judgment so that I don't derail the group by being so triggered on my own. Okay, so I think this whole issue about language being so sensitive, it is important. But let's understand the importance of it, and let's understand the pettiness of it also, because it could be petty rather than important. Over.
This reminds me a little bit of this issue of criticism, because based on my own experience, I've had some situations where it feels really warranted to criticize somebody else's behavior, and where I put a lot of work into formulating it in the right way and without any personal attacks, and making the case clear, and so on and so forth, and even, you know, it's often reasonable people. It seems to be very reasonable people, and nevertheless, I mean, I always end up with this feeling that I'm wondering if I just totally wasted my time here and just made it worse. So it's like, on the other hand, I guess it may not be so good if you have a culture where people never give any feedback either. So, but I don't know, it's just criticism just doesn't seem to work. It's just my personal experience. It just very, very, very seldom seems to lead to anything constructive. And if it does, it's almost in spite of itself. And it's, maybe if you have a very personal, close relationship, sometimes maybe some, you know, very direct, stop this nonsense, something like that maybe can work. But it's like, that aside, I don't know, it just doesn't seem to be a very effective pattern of communication.
May I disagree with that somewhat? And I think I do agree with your main intent, but there's this other saying, which I think has made the rounds quite a bit. Criticize a fool, he'll hate you. Criticize a wise man, he'll appreciate you.
Well, is that really the case?
In my view,
Or
yes.
There's
are there
another
maybe?
expression.
Stacy has another saying.
Sorry, the other expression is criticize privately, praise publicly.
But doesn't criticism almost always create a sort of an opposition, sort of a defense reaction?
See, again, to me, this is one of those semantics that to me could be dealt with. In other words, you could say criticism, I could think feedback. I could think, attempt to help. Somebody else could think, hey, this is a, guiding hand, You don't have to just sit and dwell in the word criticism if that's what you're triggered by.
Okay, let me be specific then. I mean to point to something somebody did which was a mistake and they shouldn't have done it, and to point that out. For example, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have said this, you shouldn't have said it in this kind of a way, and the reasons are blah, 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 or I don't know, it's just like, it feels that every time I do that, it doesn't lead to anything good. And it puts me into the wrong state of mind as well. It's like, it's not good for me to be in that space of, yeah.
Let me give you a counterexample. There are some people who use the term holding space. So if I'm holding space, and I'm not saying I do this, but let's use this as an example. If I'm holding space in some way to make it safe for others to speak, and let's say person XYZ says something that does not make it safe for someone to say something else, then I may say to XYZ, oh, please, can you retract that statement or whatever, because that violated the safety of the space, and therefore this other person cannot actually feel safe here, okay? Now, I don't generally use that term, but if there is some group purpose or some group intent or group agenda or group safety that is violated by someone, then yes, I would be, feeling quite responsible by saying, calling out that action and saying that, made this space less safe, less focused, less productive, less whatever, happy, coherent, use whatever word you feel at the moment. So how would that be a problem? If you're actually saying this group just got sidetracked by this person, let's try and bring it back to what we were trying to do. To me, that serves the group.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, some cases that would certainly be.
And then Barry and then Heiner have
just quickly, in terms of the word criticize, because criticize is one of those words that does tend to trigger. And I put a new definition a few days ago into Sam's glossary, the word deprecate. And here was the definition I wrote. To deprecate some activity is to counsel against it. Unlike the word criticize, which sounds like it's directed at the person, coaches deprecate a practice because it's directed at the practice rather than the person. So you can deprecate a practice which does not criticize the person. It's not like you always do that. That's criticism. But there's a practice which I would suggest you eliminate in favor of a better practice. And I'm always saying, what's the best practice? My current practice may not be the best. And if my practice is being deprecated, then let's figure out a better practice to supplant the one that's not so hot.
Yeah.
Can be future oriented, maybe.
Right, in the future. This is why when I bring up the topic that I brought up, I say, I don't know the best practice for dealing with an observed hidden agenda or an observed racket. I need some guidance on what's the best practice for handling this situation, because I kind of don't know what everything I do seems to be not the best thing to do.
That seems oxymoronic. If it's hidden, how could you observe it?
Well, no, it's a hypothesis that's a hidden agenda.
Okay.
You form the hypothesis that there is a hidden agenda.
I'm just being pokey. Heiner had his hand up, and then Alex, if you're done.
Yes, I strongly observe the difference between me, German or Americans. You have, through your situation, a very clear setting of being politically correct. I'll give you a concrete example where Josh was trying to moderate me or appease me. I said in a situation when I really felt out of my heart, why don't you shut up? And I had the same when I was in sessions long ago when I say, take your own viewpoint out. I'm tired of just speaking in this way of I. And I was moderated then by Josh saying, no, you meant be silent. No, I felt at that point, and I took it from a cabaret guy at, I don't know, in New York, Broad Street. He said, when you cannot communicate and you always fight, why don't you shut up? So for me, this shutting up was not offensive, but visually embodied meaning, stop talking, please. I'm tired, otherwise I run.
Right.
So you see, this is how politically correct people try to make an appeasement when the issues are not on the table, and we don't really have to fight it out like if we would be here on the lawn or in the woods. This is so difficult in how to communicate when I cannot even see your eyes and the smile on your face.
Anybody? Josh has a response to that. Alex, his finger was up. I don't know who was first, and then I have a response.
Yeah, I'm way back in the list from I don't know. I might have extra credits now. I don't know. What does it say on your timer? How much time do I have? Timer, Heiner? You got your timer ready? We've thought about that. Heiner puts up the timer and says that if people talk too long, he's told me to shut up a few times. In fact, I've talked to him since then. But yeah, no, you said I was going to talk a while ago. I'm not going to interrupt the flow of what's happening now, but I think you guys forgot that I was in the queue. So I'll let you figure out where I am in the queue and I'll come back. As far as Heiner, yeah, he's very much misinterpreted, but his idea of the timer is a very valuable one.
Can you explain what you're laughing about, please?
I would love to explain what I'm laughing about. Colin, you put your hand up, you wanted to talk. I assume it's not what you just spent 45 seconds talking about. I think.
Well,
that's
I wanted to make a point. I wanted to make a point that I've been waiting for like 5 or 6 turns as well. So I did make that point. Okay, that was.
But you didn't make the point. But you didn't make the point you actually wanted to make. Instead, you.
I have a list, but Sam already said Heiner and then or somebody else. So there might be a current topic. Well, I'm focusing on another
to make a point.
Does anybody know why I was laughing now?
He made a point that he wanted to make a point.
That's right.
I discovered that if you want to get the moderator's attention, you have your face on screen and raise your hand and raise the electronic one as well. You should attack from all directions.
I already did that. It was so-and-so, and then Colin.
Nobody could see you. We couldn't see you.
We if we're going to put somebody in the queue, we need to respect
Can
it.
we move to some topics, please? There are factors here that affect whether or not something is visible, okay? And visible actually draws attention a bit more. That's just animal nature. Sorry about that. Okay.
No,
So,
I may be filtered out. That's fine.
No, just if you want to say something, please make yourself, clear, and it's easier to see that you've got your hand raised if you're actually on screen. I can't see your hand raised.
Well, the topic has changed since then twice. So.
Okay, so we got Alex, and then Joshua, then Kayla, and then Colin. So let me do it this way: Alex, Josh, Kayla, Colin. I'll put it on the record. Okay.
Okay, we've got this issue of the people respecting the agenda that is brought by each of us, and sometimes some of us are here without an agenda at all, just interested in the conversation. That's a thing we need to deal with by itself. I'd like to be able to see that people with very strong agendas have like 4 stars in the corner of their screen, and people with no agenda who are just here to show up and have a talk and see what's happening have 1 in the screen, 1 diamond, something like that. Over.
Hey, babe. From my letter's right here.
Okay, Josh, you're on.
Josh, you're on. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's good to see you guys on a Saturday morning. I'm glad to be on. I just wanted to comment real quickly. Heiner, I'm not a PC police. Never have been, never will be. I'm a tone police. I heard a tone in your voice that sounded very much like my mom's tone. She happens to be German, 100% German, and she sounds like this. No, shut up, as opposed to shut the fuck up, which is another tone. Or you can use shut up. Colin, shut up. There's many tones that you could use. It wasn't the wording that you used, it was the tone. Say whatever the fuck you want. Don't give a shit. Just letting you know. Thank you very much. Good to see you guys.
Yeah. And my point is I'm not a diplomat and I'm not training to be a diplomat. So don't make me a diplomat.
Okay, Kayla is relinquishing her turn. So Colin, it is your turn.
Okay. I tried to remember exactly. I think it had to do with an idea before Glenn was talking about conflict. And I agree that conflict is important to be able to address properly. So overall, I guess the idea is if somebody sets up a show, a session, container, framework, discussion, premise, however you want to box yourself into a dialogue, then those constraints should be quite apparent. And if they're not, then you don't know what you're going to be talking about. Usually a lot of conversations, very coherent, has to do with business conversations for me because they're very focused on specific agendas. And there's a whole team of people filling the needs of that agenda. And accountable, as Sam would say, to marking things off when they're done. So that was kind of the agile road that we were looking at here. That's one kind of a framework that we can have on every fourth Saturday or something. The last Saturday of every month could be, the agile day. There's different ways to pose these different conversations. If I'm in the middle of explaining my relations to how I'm learning right now and changing my premise from reading the book Sapiens, and Heiner says, I'm tired of listening to you, then maybe I should have been in unblocking instead of, in fact, maybe it was unblocking. I don't know. No, I think it was here. It was here. So, so let's just get to something more relevant that just happened and we're discussing today. Sam was triggered and left when because I know Sam, he's going to ask questions. So he's asking Doug a question, and the answer that Sam got from Doug was Sam was done with that conversation at that point in time. I didn't take it as something that would make Sam into a crybaby or whatever he said. I thought that we just lost an asset to that conversation. And I think a few people noticed that Sam was gone immediately. And I think I said, well, knowing that Sam usually completes his thoughts and he's gone, either a dog got the wire or else he's not very satisfied with what Doug had to say. So I said maybe 20%, because that's the kind of the thing I'm trying to do with being clear, is if I'm not sure, but I'd like to share something, you could put it in the woo category, I suppose. 20%, I think this may be what's going on. Is that reliable information? Well, maybe it's 80% knowing that I know Sam, but I'm just going to say 20% for people listening because, and then I think it wasn't very much after that. I saw a comment in one of the backroom chats that said, for anybody wondering, I did leave because I was triggered or something to that effect. Maybe Sam could say what the message was, unless it was a bot. I do believe Sam posted, and I can go back and have a look. And so I might even announce that, but we don't have the recording because Doug isn't releasing them. So, or hasn't. I haven't been really paying attention last week or so too much. So yeah, I spoke about Sam. Sam doesn't care if I speak about Sam as long as I'm reasonable about it. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything, but that's collective intelligence right there of the group, of me knowing Sam, that he finishes what he starts to say. And I could tell that Sam wasn't happy with what Doug had said. Now, how does that conversation continue and get resolved is where I start to get interested. And the other comment that I was going to make, and maybe I'll save this for next time because I think Heiner's timer went off, or I need someone to do a little segue or something because everybody's going to fall asleep, or we need to do something. But the next topic would be how Sam thought I had, and Doug as well, I believe, thought I was trying to add on extra constraints or a hidden agenda to a session I was trying to moderate of these two community spearheads discussing some important terminology like agreements and defining some terms and maybe some of their meaning and intention around that. Because I've been trying to quest drawing a map of the solution space, generative space, and the, that high level view of what people's skills might be here that could gel together. And I think I've said many times, so I'm just not going to say it again right now, but we each got a bit of a fingerprint of the other person of what their ideas are. And if we could cultivate that in a much more collective intelligence way, that would be great. Criticism is part of it. So I think a course on how to take criticism, maybe a course on 5 ways to talk about somebody in a kind, nice way. Start your sentence off this way and you'll have more success than the way you have been saying that. It's not what you're saying, Colin, it's the way you're saying it. Like, why don't you use different prepositions and take the word? Everybody knows the lesson about trying to take negatives out of your sentence, trying to use positives in your sentences, just things like that. Anyway, I've talked way too long, but there is a lot of miscommunication, and I think it's due to squishing of the containers that the information is in ways that it's hard to signal each other in ways that are meaningful and continuous, that have memory. Trello didn't work, chats don't work. Google Documents, they work pretty good. Like, Sam's got some things going on with the terminology and other things. So I think it's important that we do try to refocus what each other's intentions are. And I don't think anybody has a hidden agenda here. That's ridiculous. That's like conspiracy theory first. Like, I'm sure there's hidden agendas, but I don't expect there to be any here. That's part of the thing. And Sam said he hates the term holding space, or doesn't like it, or whatever. I remember that a while ago. And I just heard him say he doesn't like it when it's in the interpretation of holding safe space, holding back possible useful content. So it's having to have a safe space. So it's a juxtapose, straw man, steel man again. Because Sam doesn't like this term, we could go out and we could invent a new term that's not holding space. That means more to what Sam wants to get to, the steel man of not holding space. But we don't have that term yet. But if we did an exploration of what the meaning is behind the words, then, okay, I'm done. I've worn them all out.
See, I was in a session with Doug and Dub, and they told me, and I'm always trying to be very short, make only short sentences and only 3. And I was just bringing them because sometimes—
That was 2 turns. 2 turns.
Josh?
I believe Stacy had her hand up first. I'm just from what I saw.
Thank you. Just one sentence before it gets lost, because I just want to highlight for me what the most important thing that Colin said was when he started a sentence with, I don't know for sure, but I think. That's perfectly acceptable. But it's important to say, I don't know. This is what I suspect. That's important. Go ahead, Josh, and thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I think we're doing a good job communicating. I think it's just good to be here. And I just was going to share, of course, I keep talking about Clubhouse, so I'll continue talking about that. I don't see any reason to stop. But the clubs, what I'm noticing is some clubs have certain rules where they allow certain things, and it's written explicitly in the rules. And so that agreement thing that you were looking for, Sam, is when you accept, it says right there before you get on a stage, or if you are a member of a club, I accept these rules. And so that explicit acceptance and agreement is there and stated, and then you can apply those rules. But then you get to have multiple clubs and multiple stages and multiple rooms with multiple rules. So in different conversation spaces, there are different rules. And if you don't like it, don't go into that club's conversation, because that club is not for you. And I think that works really, really well. And I think the idea of multiple conversations in multiple clubs is a good thing we might want to look at. And then if we're not reading the rules, that's on the person that stepped into that space. And that gives everyone a chance to make their rules, and helps to start clear communication. And keeping clear communication is a skill of a moderator. It's a very difficult thing. And giving moderator, I commend you, Sam, for in your space on Saturdays, offering the moderator ability to everybody at all different times. And I think that's really helped build the space. And with that, I'm complete. Thanks.
So anybody else with a hand up? Because I have a response to that. Okay, so one of the things you said, Josh, is very important, where we could all sort of create or co-create, I think was the implication. The rules, I think was the word that you used. So my issue that I took was that heretofore, in most of GCC, we've had this, hey, you know, everything's allowed, everybody's included, everybody's voice is welcome here. We don't do power over. Those have been very ubiquitous statements that I've heard in various different contexts. What I heard on that unblocking was, no, this is fiat dictate, which meant it was not a group discussed, consented, co-generated rule. This is something that the moderator specifically dictated by fiat. And so that I felt was actually interesting in the context of, you know, everything's allowed, all voices are welcome, and this notion of let's not exercise power over. To me, that looked like power over. So that's why I felt, let me go away and think about this a little bit rather than immediately be triggered and respond. So I went away and thought about it, and I wrote up a short little note, objectively, which I don't think was in the unblocking session itself because I was out of it by that point, okay? I wrote it in the Facebook Messenger chat unblocking group and possibly elsewhere. I think there was one other place, maybe barn raising, and that was it. So I did some thinking and tried to really collect my thoughts before I wrote that. But I also wanted to write it for the record. And that is the way I saw it. Over. Alex has his finger up, and then Glenn.
I still, yeah, but, as in, yeah, but.
What's the
When
word?
yeah, but.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, everybody's got an opinion. Yeah, but the making call of assholes.
I don't get the point.
Well, somebody's moderating a session and they're saying this is open and everything's, we'll hear everyone's concern. You're allowed to say what you think. But, you know, you're not allowed to talk about people if they're not here or something to that effect. So there's rules. They're bringing rules in when they just said this is an open session where we don't have any rules. So that's a yeah, but. Over.
Okay, Glenn, I think you were next.
Can we put a little context on that? Just quick interruption. I believe Doug might have brought it up when I was trying to talk about the alphabet code that somebody invented and what the value of that was to me. That was what I was not allowed to talk about, I think.
Yeah, well,
Glenn, you're on.
yeah, I've got several thoughts in my head on that. this is the point Josh made, that different rooms have different rules, and if Doug wants a certain rule for that day, then if you don't like it, you don't have to be there, and so on. I was reminded last week, Stacy asked me a question about the post I'd written on Facebook, and afterwards I realized that I really gave an incredibly confusing answer, because I went on this long rant about behavior, which is one of my hobby horses. But the truth was just that I just thought that post was hilariously funny. I mean, and I don't even know why. I mean, it was, so sometimes I get a sentence that just comes into my head, and it's just so funny. I don't know why, and I just have to write it and share it. And I don't know if that's the way you should do it, but sometimes I do that. So if that's not a good practice, then I'm open for feedback. But that's just a little aside. There's this big issue here. I feel it's close by what we're talking about, with this debate about wokeness and free speech and that kind of stuff. Because I don't really know what to make of it yet, but you know, there's a lot of, I mean, there was this person who writes a lot and is very critical of this woke culture, which is, you know, some people say that it's a sort of a subtle way to manipulate and silence others and power over, basically, right? And that you can use this sometimes, you know, saying that you're offended by something, and you know, maybe you are, right? So it's a complicated issue, but I mean, it's definitely, I mean, this is a hard nut, right? What do you do if somebody does that, and does that deliberately to, you know, just create chaos? And it's a big issue, I think, these days, because regarding political correctness, and regarding this issue of reading into other people certain negative judgments about their intentions. I mean, it reminds me of Marshall Rosenberg. I heard a little bit of his talk on nonviolent communication, and he had this very neat simplification that all communication is basically either please or thank you. And that if you bring in judgments about people's intentions, that's when things go off the rails. So his suggestion was definitely just to remove judgments about others' intentions, and to just clean that away from your own vocabulary. But obviously, you know, how does that thing fit with this wokeness issue? Now it's yeah, that's a whole big topic. I don't have any answers, but I'm just putting it out here because I think it's a very interesting topic.
So anybody else with their hand up? Because I do.
Yeah, I did.
Stacey, you want to go?
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to ask Glenn if he knew why I asked him that question about the post, or if he'd like to know why I asked him the question about the post.
Yeah, I'd love to know. Yeah.
So what I found is sometimes people will put up a post about something very personal to them, that there may be a piece of them that wants to say more, but they don't feel like they can, or they don't feel they've been invited to. So I had no way of knowing why you put it up. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something you wanted to share and that you weren't waiting to be asked. So that was why. I mean, there are many times I've put things up like really, you know, quotes that I thought were really meaningful or good life advice. And I'll get these instant messages. Oh, honey, are you okay? Do you need to talk? I'm here for you. and has nothing to do with anything I'm going through. It's just something that I recognize as being good advice. So I just used it as an opportunity to find out what the case was.
But it's a funny thing though, because maybe there was something I wanted to say that I didn't even know what it was, because why is it that a sentence comes to me and I just find it so incredibly funny and I just love it? I don't even know why. And it's maybe some kind of subconscious message wants to be communicated. So, it's so maybe there's something to that as well. It's I just think it's an interesting thing when sometimes you just get this weird sentence in your head and just makes an incredible impression and you just want to share it and you don't really know what it means. You just think it's very, very funny and interesting and strange in some way. Maybe there is something that wants to come out. Yeah.
Alex or Barry, I'm not sure who's first.
Just to double back to Marshall Rosenberg, Nonviolent Communication. I have a good friend who teaches that practice, and so he keeps reminding us of exactly how to word a response in the format of nonviolent communication, and it's very formulaic. If you observe an anomalous remark or anomalous behavior that's kind of like, what was that about? If you have some inkling of it and you're not sure that your inkling is on target, the formula is to say something like, are you feeling X because of an unmet need for Y? And you nominate candidate feelings X and candidate unmet needs Y. And that's an invitation to either concur or say, well, not exactly, but, and then maybe open up. And Heiner had posted a fabulous TED Talk by Celeste Headley. Celeste Headley is an American journalist on National Public Radio. She hosts a number of talk shows and she does a lot of interviews. And one of the things that Celeste Headley talks about is how to ask questions that get people to open up, where the audience would be interested in the response. But also Celeste Headley says she doesn't bring on pundits, political pundits. She says, if you have an opinion, write a blog.
Alex, then Kayla, then me.
I'm done. I put it in the chat for Glenn.
Okay, Kayla.
So that's funny what you said, Stacy and Glenn, when you guys are interpreting the things posted on social media. I like that you had Stacy asked him directly. I wish more people would ask others directly what they thought, and instead of kind of hemming and hawing over the interpretation of what they could think, why don't you just ask them?
Exactly.
I also think that all of this communication and efforts goes back to deep listening. And when you ask questions, it shows that you're paying attention, rather than making these wild assumptions. I've gotten called out before, like, wow, you're mean. Your post is really mean. And I'm just like, well, I thought it was funny because it's true, and if you want to talk to me about something that you think is mean, let's have a healthy conversation about it. And it's funny because I've observed that a lot of people are very uncomfortable with that. And I get it. I have told you many, many times that I'm not very good at articulating too many things, and perhaps that's the deal, but it's refreshing to actually see, people being completely honest and unafraid to ask difficult things and bring up things that might be really uncomfortable. Anyway, over.
Thanks, Kayla. So back to a reference on Marshall Rosenberg. I was exposed to this perspective that I'm about to describe years ago, which is that if you have an issue with someone, there's three ways that you can actually address the issue. You can actually address the issue directly and really just say, hey, here's what I saw, what did you mean by this? Let's really try and figure this out and really do it responsibly, one-on-one, resolve the issue, move forward. That's what most people would like to see. Let's just call that level 1. There's a level 2, however, which is, this has actually been going on repeatedly. It's not just a single instance, it's a pattern, okay? So that pattern is now deeper than that one issue. If you like attempted to resolve it, did resolve it, but it keeps coming back, then there's something deeper at work. And you have to address the pattern, not just the issue at that point, okay? You can't just say, oh, let's just be in the moment, let's address it, because you've done that before, and it's always come back. So ignoring the fact that it's a pattern is a disservice to both of you at that point. Then there's a level 3, which is that the pattern is not resolvable, and now this begins or has already affected the relationship. So the relationship is potentially damaged if this pattern recurs, repeats. And then you have to address things at the relationship issue level, not just at the base level of level 1, or even at the pattern level of level 2, but it's now that, hey, here's what it's doing to our relationship if you keep this up, or if we keep this up. So there's at least those 3 levels. And, you know, when something comes up for the very first time, absolutely, try dealing with it at level 1. But if it repeats, or if it's beginning to damage your relationship, recognize that and don't just try and treat it at level 1 and pretend that the other doesn't exist, okay? Because that's, again, not very productive. But that's thought number 1, okay? Number 2 is something I'd like to respond to Kayla about, which is this whole issue of, hey, did somebody take her post as mean, okay? This is, I think, very, very important in a multicultural society. The fact that we even have people that think political correctness is okay is, in my interpretation, a disrespect for other cultures. The fact that somebody could say, hey, you know, Heiner, don't say it this way, or hey, Kayla, don't post it this way, or Sam, don't say it that way, really, you know, is trying to say, oh no, my way is correct, okay? And your way in some way goes against my guidelines or my rules, and I'm going to try and get you to change. I think if it invites a conversation, that's the best possible outcome. But for this political correctness or these implied rules or these guidelines that are non-written to be enforced in such a way, that to me is what I find curious. And I think that I would like to reflect on, okay, so what is the difference in culture that makes that their reasonable response? And there is a good practice, which I'm not perfect at, you know, doing, but it's to ask yourself, how would an otherwise reasonable person be doing this at this moment? So if you actually have, you know, valued the relationship, you value this person's opinions, you value what they're bringing, and then they say something that just catches you and you want to react. I've heard, and it's good practice, and it's difficult, and I don't do it perfectly, is to ask myself, how would an otherwise intelligent, well-meaning person have uttered that statement or taken this action? And see if there's any kind of way that you can interpret that, and then pose that as the question that Kayla is talking about. Did you mean this? As opposed to just, you know, sitting back and saying, oh, that's Sam being a crybaby again. Over. Barry's got his finger up.
Just a real quick one. One of the phrases that I learned from a psychologist some 40 years ago is when you're objecting to something that happened, and there's lots of ways to express an objection, the way that he was coaching is to say, I take exception to that. And then objectively describe what you should. So the phrase, I take exception to whatever it is, that's a practice I was still 40 years later trying to remember to use.
I've heard that, but what does it really mean? I don't know what that means. I take exception.
Sounds a little strange to me.
Yeah, it's an interesting verbal construct.
What kind of construct was it? What was the word?
I take exception to. I don't even know what that means.
It's
Oh, you
like-
said dribble concept? Durable concept? What was the
Verbal. Verbal construct.
verbal
Verbal
concept?
I've already heard some explanations for some strange things that now make more sense to me than they did when I first heard them. So
It's like
hearing
we had a-
Barry explain nonviolent communication explains to me some of the things he said to me that I've misinterpreted, perhaps.
Anyway, I think Alex has.
I just didn't expect them. I just didn't expect them that way. That's what I think Glenn was saying. It sounds strange. So I think introducing that you're going to sound strange is important. And he may even have done that.
I've
Alex has his finger up.
seen a lot of results from experiments, and a lot of those conversations in recovery were like experiments in human communication and personal, very close and personal communication. And sometimes you get the result and it seems to be always A, B, or C. When it's always A, you're fairly confident that this is the fact. And somebody comes on the show, on the discussion, and says the result is B, then immediately you take exception to that.
Just a quick follow-up. In computers, when a computer takes exception to something and throws an error message, the term is it threw an exception. The code threw an exception. So that's the actual word that they use in computer programming. When the computer says, I take exception to what you just put in, I can't process it, I don't know what to do with it, I take exception to that.
Computer's saying, I'm sorry, you can't do that. It's against,
Or I don't
it's
know what
against-
to do with it.
It's not an instruction, I understand.
Right. No,
No, it's saying somebody else handle this issue because I cannot. That's what exception means in
right.
software.
Blue screen.
But like, imagine a conversation where everyone does this continuously. I take exception to what you said there and the way you said it, and the whole thing isn't even gonna move a centimeter.
Exactly.
Do that too much. I mean, it's
Can I be triggered right now?
insanity.
Can I be triggered? I'm
Exception to
really
that.
triggered. I'm really triggered.
Shoot.
I'm really triggered.
Why shoot?
Yeah.
Let me go back to some of the things and let me pull them together, okay? Because I like the fact that you said that, Glenn, okay? Every utterance is an approximation at meaning.
Yeah.
There's the 80%, there's the 20%, or we call it 97% and the 3%, okay? To me, there's way too much focus on the 3% or the 20%. Why don't you first try and get the main intent of what was trying to be conveyed, as opposed to just go for that corner case where that allows you to be triggered. I'm allowing myself to be triggered right now, okay? So why don't we be generous and say, let me see what the real intent of that well-meaning person was first, rather than saying, oh, that word didn't fly with me. I wish that person would have used a different word, and I'm gonna interrupt the flow and I'm gonna say that.
It's a kind of
There's too much
madness.
focus on the 3% and the 20% and not enough leaning into the 80 or 97%. And if you just accept that every statement is an approximation, go for the main meat of the intent. Don't go for the cartilage, don't go for the ligaments and object to that, okay? Go where the meat is. Okay, I'll stop being triggered. Over.
There's another version of this too, where somebody says something and then there's always something they didn't say, because it's kind of physically impossible to say absolutely everything. And then so you have a statement, goes this far, and then there's something else that could also be said. So you can always say, but you forgot to mention this. And this kind of pattern is peculiar, and you often see it. It's kind of becomes kind of a absurd thing. The whole
Crazy
thing.
making.
Yeah,
Crazy
it's crazy making. Yeah, if you just take that stuff too far, the whole thing just becomes a joke.
Bridge too far.
Alex,
I forgot to mention something. That is the triggering point is when the pendulum swings, so then hits that triggering point, you become triggered. I'm interested in what is at the other end of the spectrum when the pendulum's at the other side. What's happening there? And is that where I'm connected? Is that where I'm feeling involved in a part of the conversation where I'm gelling? Over.
Didn't quite understand that. You mean what's the opposite of getting triggered? Or
Yeah, there's a spectrum of emotional response, and triggered is one extreme end, right? When you're triggered, you want to get that person's attention and explain why they were saying something that triggered you. But at the other end of the spectrum, where the pendulum swings back the other way, I want to know what's happening there. That's when you're feeling as one with the community, you're feeling involved and heard, and you're gelling with the conversation, so that you're becoming more comfortable with and more able to express what you do feel deeper. What is coming up?
Coherence is
Yeah.
maybe the word. Coherence is a good
The word that came to mind for me is ameliorated. I'm triggered or I'm ameliorated. And whenever somebody uses a word that's an extreme, I try to figure out what is the axis that defines the opposite. So I will often, for example, if I hear the word consent, I'll think, what's the opposite of consent? Dissent. So I'm thinking consent, dissent axis. And where are we along this axis? So when Alex says triggered, I think triggered versus ameliorated. But that's one of the ways to take an extreme word is, what's the name of the axis along this thing is sliding? What's the opposite end of that axis?
I've never heard that word before. Ameliorated.
I'll write it down. And maybe there's a better synonym that somebody can come up with that
I
means
like the sound of it.
can also mean mitigated.
I like coherence. That's a good word, because that's sort of like when the flow is good and you understand one another.
Confluence. Coherence and confluence.
Acknowledged.
Well, you can acknowledge a criticism without necessarily accepting it. I got what you said. I understand what you said. I don't necessarily buy it.
I take that under consideration. I remember you said
Under advisement.
I must acknowledge that comment.
That's also the Buddha's statement. I see your anger. I refuse your gift.
Oh, yeah.
You may keep your gift.
Right.
I do not accept your gift of anger. But I have a question. Actually, it goes way back to when Stacy first got here. Okay. And that is, Stacy referred to the energy coming from me as I was saying something. I was really curious about that because I don't know what energy was coming to you from me, Stacy. I'm really trying to figure out, what am I emanating that you're picking up? And I was curious to see if anybody else was. And I heard two people say, but I didn't hear everybody, what they were getting from me. So I was really curious about that. And because I want to make a point about that later, but first I want to hear the response.
Well, I was just going to say you should watch it. And, I mean, I want to see the first 10 minutes too, so maybe we could watch it together.
Sure.
And then,
Yeah. Dalvin Heiner brought this up in a session, I think earlier this week, or maybe it was last week, about if you can't figure out the semantics, if you try to take the words and parse the sentences and diagram them and you get the null semantics, Dove and Heiner were saying, listen for the energy, listen for the feeling, forget the semantics, just try to eke out the sentiment, the feeling, the emotion. And so if there's a lot of energy and you don't know what the hell they're upset about, figure out, where are they coming from emotionally? And I find personally, that's hard to do. Are you feeling X because of an unmet need for Y? What the hell is X? I can see that there's some energy there, but I don't know the name of the feeling X that is behind it all. What is the emotion that's motivating this engagement? That's for me very hard to do.
for most people, I think.
Yeah. May I make a wild guess, and I'm usually way off the mark.
I'm trying to learn that. That's why I'm trying to figure out, what Stacy was getting from me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stacy
Because
will,
sorry.
Stacy will remember where somebody said, why were you angry when you said that? And I said, I wasn't angry when I said that.
Right.
I wasn't saying that out of anger.
Right.
I don't know where you thought it was anger. It wasn't anger.
Yeah. See, this is the point I was trying to get to. Okay. I think that intensity sometimes does not come across as intensity. Sometimes it's mistaken.
Yeah.
Well, it comes across as intensity, but you don't necessarily know why the intensity.
Yes, I agree. Okay.
Right.
So to sense something is valid, but to interpret it as something else may not be. And let me go back to this other theme, which is if we're really, really trying to co-create something, okay? And right now in this particular forum, we can't actually, hammer nails onto wood, we can't do that. The co-creation we do right now is verbal and in the idea space, okay? So we can't actually be building a brick building. We're building ideas and models and, thought structures. And if we're really doing that, we're really talking about ideas. And if we're really talking about ideas, we're really deeply in the prefrontal cortex.
Right.
And if we're really in the prefrontal cortex, there may be a thinking, there may be an interpretation, there may be a thought, there may be, but it may not be like all of this heartfelt amygdala generated, warmth that may be what people are more looking for. Okay. I admit that I'm not always, making sure my amygdala is okay. I'm really thinking about, okay, so how does that idea that Barry said connect with that idea that Glenn said, connected with what Josh said, connected with what Kayla just said, connected with what Stacy just said. I'm in that space, okay? So if that comes across as the wrong energy, then I'm really curious, how to do it differently and whether or not it ought to be taken that way. I don't know. I'm just exploring.
Yeah, because I mean, I never said it was the wrong energy. I asked you about it.
Yeah, so that's why I'm curious about it, I don't know what I'm sending out there other than, like really trying to lean in, listen well, connect ideas, be intense. There.
Well, I can say that I definitely get a sense from you quite often, a very passionate person, and that you don't necessarily show it, right? But it's always there, and sometimes you show it, right? And those moments, you kind of seem very natural in your right element, so to say. So, but that's something that I just kind of notice, like a continuous thing. That yeah. And passion can, of course, sometimes, come across as intense or angry, and it can become anger, right? But it's basically just kind of an intense passion, right? It can go in all kinds of directions. I think I have some of that too, sometimes.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah, sure.
There's something Sam said about 3 minutes ago, that we're not here to actually nail boards onto timber, put nails in timber onto wood and make something. We're just in a conversation space. I'm actually making a real 3D model of the College of Knowledge that I'm going to put on the hemp farm, and it's a huge structure. It's a hexagonal dome, the main part of it. And so that's under development at the moment. In about a week, I'll have some pictures to show, possibly even a scale model. Over.
Colin, I think.
Yeah, what time have we got here? 1:48. So not a lot of time. I guess this would be like a checkout for the main show anyway. So I did review some of that video previously more than today because I was paying attention. I was listening, but I gave this about 10% of my time. I took this, I tried to look for any keywords that were, and I didn't really find anything other than it looked like I looked pretty tired. It looks like I had allergies that day. Sam, if you remember, that was the day you were starting to use the whiteboard for focus. And I think I may have tried to demo putting the camera on my map, thinking that we might be able to use those tools or encourage maybe some interest in those tools. I do remember a couple of scenarios I'm looking to see again. I haven't seen them yet. If anybody wants to know what that is, I can describe them, but it's very close to what we're talking about today. But I'm much more interested in moving forward and talking in person to the people affected than in public, because it doesn't do a service to the format that we're in, I don't believe. And I've felt that all along. So I've decided to be silent instead of try to put a square peg in a round hole, which is these shows. Unless we actually want to slice off some time and do it, like officially. And then Heiner isn't shaking his little, timer thing or at somebody here in the group. So I would like to see if we could focus on things if we want to dive into them. And otherwise, this might not be the appropriate place to try to fit it all in. And I think announcing that you would like to fit something in is important, and knowing, and that's the announcement and that's the inviting. So if we get good at announcing and inviting and not trying to just jam it in there. And if people don't want to listen to what you're saying, then like Sam said, saves you both a lot of time and effort. And try to be nice with your explanations of I don't understand or I'm not aligning with that, as opposed to saying nasty things to people, which is going to be taken as abuse no matter how you wrap it in. It's just not nonviolent. I think nonviolent communications and looking at tools like that, we could really spend some time doing that. And I mentioned some today that, what are the 5 sentences? Barry mentioned that as well. So I think moving positive and then maybe doing some learning from mistakes we've made directly with the people involved, and then maybe bringing back some lessons to the group as a gift, as opposed to trying to solve something in a format that's not conducive to it. I guess that's my experience. Thank you.
Well, let me remind you that there's at least 2 sessions per month that I'm very open to someone taking the moderation and the focusing responsibility. Next Saturday, for example, I believe is the 5th Saturday. So it's not necessarily mine, it's not necessarily anybody's. I'm just saying, if anybody has a burning topic like you or Barry, next week is possible. Otherwise, I will focus on some of the questions that I've already prepared, but that's always available, okay?
Can you remind me what the topic was that I nominated myself for 2 weeks ago? I don't even remember what it was.
That's funny.
It
You
was,
got a jukebox, Barry. You can just put the quarter in and hit play almost, right?
I know something that I could do off the top of my head on short notice, but I don't remember what it was.
I believe it was drama theory.
Oh, drama theory. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's, yes, I'm sure
Yes,
you're right.
it was
drama
make,
theory.
make good art, and something else was added to that. Make it comical or humorous or storytelling. Make good art with good storytelling.
Yeah.
Fusion.
Yeah. Make it entertaining, maybe comical if that's appropriate. But yeah, make good art comes from Neil Gaiman, the famous script writer and director. He did quite a number of popular series. Make good art. Yeah.
I will think about that when I design this construction I'm working on, because it's just a dome, hexadecimal dome just by itself is pretty common. They're common, everyone's building them. So something odd, I'll add something strange to it to make it artful.
But you want to show that you can make something artful out of an unusual material. That's your point, is I can make something artful that's useful, functional, but it's made out of material that people haven't thought about using. That's what you want to show. You haven't lost anything by
Kayla's
using.
got $1 for somebody.
Say what?
Kayla's got some money for somebody. Anyway, oh, is
Let's
it
see,
half
yeah.
a dollar?
Money.
Did you?
What is that? Oh, it's a $2 bill.
Oh, $2 bill.
Is that the one that has that writing on it that you had a picture of? That you can't pay for appreciation or something? I forget exactly the wording.
I don't know. I've only got 2 of those, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm folding 200 of these,
$2 bills?
200 $2 bills.
Oh.
Oh, and that one had the writing on it.
Money is just paper, but gratitude is not for sale.
Gratitude. That was the word. Yeah.
Ah,
What are you folding them for?
A money lay for graduation.
Oh, a money lay. Okay, I didn't quite get the connection to making lays.
oh.
Making lays out of $2
Yeah.
bills. Okay.
Yeah, this is when I don't sleep. I'm folding and putting lays together.
Well,
She was be
I've got my hand up also.
ahead.
All right, well, let me check in. I mentioned that I'm trying to stay where I am, and hopefully this week meant that there's a little bit of progress towards me actually staying here rather than getting booted out next month. So there's a little bit of positive progress there. I thought I'd just share that a little bit. Okay.
You mean the house you're in?
Yeah, I have a right to purchase for this home that I'm renting, but that right to purchase expires next month. So
I
I'm
see.
trying to exercise that option. Okay.
So you found some creative financing, because you mentioned you needed
It
creative.
turns out I had some IRAs I was not aware or conscious that I had. So if I cash those out, that's actually enough for a down payment.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how after several decades, there's a bunch of accounts that, if you go say, maybe there's enough there, So I may have to not have to go beg and borrow and steal, to get the down payment. So that's what I'm
And
What's
mortgage
the
rates are
IRA?
right now.
Otherwise, I'd have to go after some of Kayla, can I get a $2 bill?
What's an
Anyway.
IRA?
It's
IRA?
an individual retirement account. In the US, we have these
Ah.
things which have some tax protections for some of the gains
You don't pay taxes on the money you put into an IRA. You pay taxes when you take it out.
on the profits. Yeah, on the gains.
Right.
Okay. All right. So anyway, I want to check out also with this one other thing, which is when we're trying to figure out how to coexist, much of what we're trying to do is how we deal with disagreement or misunderstanding. If we do this in a calm way, then I think we're actually coexisting well. I think if we let it escalate to anger or conflict, then I don't think that's coexisting well. But to the extent that we can explore misunderstandings before they get to disappointments and really lean into disagreements, to me, it's hard to do that practice and have it come across as very safe for the amygdala. And that, I think, is what we have to learn. We have to learn that we have enough protections that our amygdala will not be threatened by someone trying to understand us and indeed actively asking questions about it. I think we have to learn to be receptive to that. Now, ideally, it would be great if we did that and all felt that our amygdalas are well taken care of, but I think there's a certain sense that you have to, this is going to come across wrong, but protect your own amygdala. Take care of yourself. Come prepared. Come prepared with your, best adulting. Don't be a 5-year-old. And I really would like to see us level up in our degree of communication, the ability to disagree, the ability to be generous, the ability to really understand, is this an important point to bring up, or is it a really corner case and it's not really necessary to bring that up at the moment? Use that judgment. I think that's what I'm exploring here. And let me say one more thing about hidden agendas. I don't think it's actually hidden, but much of the reason why I love recording these sessions is because the interpersonal and indeed intrapersonal stuff is available for review later on. Like, for example, Stacy says, go back and review the video. I will go back and watch myself and see what Stacy saw. That's a huge part of the value of having these. And I do think if it does push away the people who do not want to be on record, who do not want to own their words and their statements, and it makes them go away, I'm okay with that. I'd rather interact with people who are willing to stand behind what they say and own what they do or say. I am, even though many of it, is not reflecting my best self. I can accommodate that. I can acknowledge that. I can say, oh yeah, I did that. I'll try and do better. I don't expect to be perfect, at all times. But people who are afraid of showing that they're not perfect, well, there are plenty of other people I can interact and collaborate with at this moment. I don't have to necessarily do it with them right now. I guess that's what I'm saying. We self-select. I really would want to interact much more with people who are willing to be on the record with what they say and do. Over.
So I agree with everything you said, but my comment actually ties a few things together, including the recording that we were talking about earlier. Because part of what Colin said, and I think he's right, there is a certain time, there are certain conflicts that it would almost be impossible to have that degree of honesty, because even if you're trying to control your amygdala, you are aware that this is being recorded. Now, I would be very comfortable in having almost any conversation with the group of people that are right here. That doesn't necessarily mean that I want to be as transparent with people I don't even know, because I've already self-selected, and this group here is a group that I trust. That being said, what I do think works well is if, you have the conflict and you go off to a separate place, but then if those two people can come back and mutually report what happened. And I even would be okay with taping that, but to watch that would have to be with their permission. So I think there should be different, levels of privacy.
Thank you. I mostly agree with that.
What do you take exception to?
The
I'm
only thing
kidding.
is, right now, this particular forum, we've gone on record at least as saying we do share among ourselves and we do share with others. This recording, okay? I'm completely okay with one-on-ones or side conversations being treated however those people want to do it. If I'm involved, I would do exactly as you say. I would record it and then see if the other person is okay with sharing that, with the original group, myself. Over. So I'm not sure that was an exception.
I just have a little thing about, you mentioned we're in the idea space. Yeah, I mean, is that the essence of it? Or is there an energy transfer? Is there a sense of community, of just being together with people and talking with people? And, maybe that's the most important thing. I mean, maybe it's certainly very important. The ideas, ideas sort of don't go very far as long as they're just ideas, right? So, yeah. What are you thinking, Sam?
I think that the community you're talking about does happen. But I think for me, that's not primary. I do understand that for some, it is primary. For me, it's never been primary. For me, I'm always looking at how does successful collaboration scale? That was me on day one. That is me here on day 1000 or whatever day it is, okay? I'm still focused. That is my focus. The fact that we have established some familiarity, some trust, some community, some love, that's great. There's nothing bad about that. I value that. To me, those are side effects and side products of my really intense focus on really understanding how does successful collaboration scale. And that is still my focus. Over. Let me repeat, that is still my focus. My focus is on successful collaboration skills.
Personally, I think my best guess would be that if it's going to scale, there has to be a certain level of the energy, so to say, or a certain kind of an atmosphere of, yeah, I mean, hard to define it, but it's these things that you can't measure, but you can sense it. The kind of things that women generally are better at understanding than men, for example. And I guess I've kind of gradually moved more and more to the view that this is a lot more important than I previously thought for if we want to have successful collaboration scaling. There's another thing, and that is one thing I would like to see is some kind of, you know, one person sharing an idea, right? Now we're talking really ideas, right? And sharing it in the way that they feel is a good sharing. It can be writing, can be spoken, can be both, right? Ideally, both. And then if we all do that, and then others can suggest other versions of it. So that would be an example of something that you could do instead of criticizing or commenting on something somebody has written, for example. You can actually just come with a different alternative, and maybe even a very different alternative. And maybe you can create a comedy version. Maybe you can create a short version. And I mean, I have this idea that if you have several people do this forward and back, then over time, you know, they would grow ideas as well as formulations of those ideas, which are the result of the collective intelligence of the group. And if you could do that without the interference of these kind of ego reactions and this sort of sense of ownership and that kind of stuff, that might be a really effective way to generate collective intelligence and build ideas, you know, just very, in just a very practical sense. I mean, just pure writing, even if you just keep it to that. I mean, you write something that you think is okay, let's put it this way. First, there's a question, right? Let's say it's a hard question. How do we solve this issue? Then each person comes with a response, and they have their best response, a good response that they're pretty happy with, and they thought about it and they spent a little time, you know, formulating it. And then we write different versions of one another's responses. And I think that would be very interesting, because I was at this course, and they were going to teach me to write a CV, and it was sort of a government thing to help me get back into work because I've been out of work for a couple of years. And I wrote something, and then she looked at it, and then she wrote some changes, and the whole thing was so much better. Like immediately, the whole thing just vastly improved. just from just that one iteration. So I'm just wondering what would happen if we did that, like on scale. What if we did that a lot, like did a lot of iterations, and you end up with, you know, maybe you have one question and each person maybe has 10 different answers that they would like to give, which can be quite different, and where all of those answers are informed by all the other minds in the room and it's sort of been co-created. So you know, if we want to create ideas and build that, I would suggest we try something like that. Yeah.
Could it be me, Alex, Colin, Stacy? Or Alex, did you want to go first?
No, it's you go first. I was just going to mention something about collaboration, but I'll refine what I was going to say. So you go first.
Okay. So I've often brought up this thing about caring and thinking, right? In other words, the default behavior that I think others are resonating with is, I don't care what you think until I really know what you care about, or something paraphrasing that. In other words, so something like, I don't care what you know until I know what you care. Or I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. Okay, that's it. That's it. That's the form of it. Okay. So in other words, that's the heartfelt connection before we get to the head business. Okay. Now, it may be short-sighted of me, but once I establish that with someone, maybe I don't take enough care to really just check in heart level all the time. I'm more here. I'm more, okay, so we're beyond that. Let's really co-create, okay? And what I'm hearing is sometimes it's important to always check back and reestablish this heart connection, and then, you know, go back and just do that. So that may be something I need to learn and do more of, but I kind of take that for granted a bit too much sometimes, okay? That's observation number one. Does that really affect how I come across though? Well, that's why I'm asking myself, you know, if I don't spend enough time, I don't even know how I would do it on a Zoom session though, you know, if I'm actually stating something, how do I state it verbally and yet at the same time come across as heart connected with all of you here? I don't know how to do that.
Joshua, he's good at that stuff.
Well, first
I
you
think
need a
so.
voice. You need a voice that's attractive and have an impact. You need to have an impact. And I'm saying you, but I do it too. I need an impact. And collaborating, this is the point I wanted to bring up. When we're in a group of people who we feel in tune with, in focus with, and somebody's causing disruption or interjecting with distraction issues, it's not always a good idea to point the finger, because I always got to remember when I do that, I've got three fingers pointing back at myself, because I've interrupted other people. I've brought in subjects and topics that were distracting from the point that they were on before. So I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of doing it as much as anybody else is. And so I apologize for pointing out somebody else's faults, even though they were on the session. And doing that to somebody who's not here, I think that's a bit of a breach of the guidelines. So I would finish on this note. When people have come into the group that are new and we notice that they're doing some of these behaviors we've not recommended, then we could point out to that person they should go back and read the guidelines. Over.
Go ahead, Stacy. I don't know if you're going to check out or not.
It's okay.
We're kind of in the after show, but if you're going to stick around.
Yeah, I
know
do
you're-
want to.
Go ahead, Stacy.
Thank you. So one of the things that, you know, I've been thinking about a lot of these things, and, you know, there's always what somebody wants to talk about and what somebody wants to hear a person talk about. And I thought it would be interesting not to follow through with this exercise, but just to Like, for example, for me to be able to come up with something for each one of you of, if I were going to ask you a question, what do I really want to hear from that person? Like, what do I want Kayla's opinion on? It's not going to be the same as what I want Colin's opinion on. And I thought if we were to look at each other with those questions, then that person could know which of the questions most is something they want to answer. So like Colin, if each one of us had a different question for you, then you have 1, 2, 3, you have 7 questions to pick from. And one of them might be something you'd really enjoy answering. And that might give some information. So that's all I was going to say.
Well, that's very interesting, Stacy. I think that's a good narrative you've laid out there. I can see the story you just told, although I think it's backwards to me. Surprise, surprise, I'd have a criticism, right?
Well, here's the thing. It is backwards to the way things have happened in the world till this point. And that
Right.
is the point. I think we need to go backwards and do it differently.
I shouldn't have said backwards. I think it's step 2, where step 1 would be for the person to introduce themselves to the space. Now, Sam says holding space is bad. I think, I should think about that. It is a bit annoying to people because it's so general. It doesn't mean anything. Holding safe space means that it has to be politically correct. I think I don't know what the term that Sam needs to say holding space that's not necessarily always politically correct, but as kind as we can have it. Like, what's that word? I think that word's a fair conversation, but how can you watch the conversation as it goes off the rails, right? As somebody starts to manipulate, somebody starts to use abusive language, gaslight, straw man, all these things, like people don't even know what the terms are. So how do we navigate the story as it's being told? Maybe we don't have to navigate it. That was the point with Barry's Child in the Garden, right? Maybe his story can just be the way that it is. If you bring it to the global stage, I say, well, now it is picking a certain culture. Can we rewrite the story without losing meaning? That was a good conversation. I don't know where that conversation went, but that's a worthwhile conversation. I think Barry said that it couldn't be unless you wanted to maybe water it down some way. And maybe what I wanted to get across, I could do, but what he's trying, so it's not the same story. I don't know, but it's very interesting to analyze what somebody's trying to say in a global space where it's being recorded as a show for millions of people to possibly absorb, right? Or if I'm having a private conversation. And Sam's point is very important. What somebody else says here reflects upon them, not upon me. So if somebody else here says that perhaps like I have a problem with the ability to think or something like that, that doesn't mean it's true. That just means that person could have chose a different way to explain to me that they thought I might hurt myself. Because if you can't think, you probably end up hurting yourself, unless the person doesn't care at all, right? So, and you can get that when people get into this identity stuff. So if I'm using the platform of fair conversation and I'm trying to come up with examples of when it's fair and when it's not fair, you can pick a certain context where there's good and bad things about it. But if you pick one context that somebody has a pet identity with, they're not going to listen to what your example is. They're going to say, you're attacking my identity. And that is a big issue I've come across in this group with the word woo, with the word soul, and some other words. So I've learned how to approach those conversations if necessary. And what makes them necessary? That they've been brought into the global forum to be shared with everybody, right? So do I have to give my opinion on everything? No. But if Stacy says, I want your opinion on something, like she was painting a picture of, then that's okay, because she's identified in me that there's something that I might know. And I'm open to that because she's learned something about me that's valuable to her and she wants to explore it if it might be useful. But I see the reason why I said a stage first is because I would hope that I would bring the idea of fair conversation and people would just be picking apart this, what's a fair conversation? What is it? Show me another example, right? That's what I want people to be asking me. Like, why does it matter? Why do you come here and think that that's why you're here? That's just ridiculous. And especially since you said you can just go in the dictionary and look up 2 terms, put them together, and you're done. It's a lot easier said than done. That's the point. And even just trying to explain words around that context pisses people off. I can't figure out why. Like Heiner got right up in arms last Sunday or someday about the word straw man, sand man, all this stuff. I'm German. I don't know what's going on. It was like, and then they got into this thing that you guys were talking about today, like get into the intention behind what the person's saying. Like I think Barry was saying the conversation went into go into the emotions, and Dove was saying if he did this job in Thailand. I'm talking about somebody isn't here, by the way. Dove said he was in Thailand and he would listen to somebody's body language and verbal cues and all that stuff, and he doesn't even know what the language is. And as well, Tease is here and he does that. He goes to groups where he doesn't know the language. So he's someone we could ask about this. Now, if Tease is doing it out of his hobby, that's great. That's actually quite interesting. But if I'm working with somebody on a plant floor and I don't understand what their language is, that's dangerous. So the question is, what is it that I would like to talk about? Do you know, does anybody know what that is? Do you respect that? Can I go to each person here and say, you can say, are you interested or not interested? And then that saves us a whole lot of time. And you don't have to be mean about it. And it shouldn't take 8 hours, right? So there's indications of what a fair conversation is. And it's about, to me, it's about framing the space so that everybody feels that they can get their premise out so that the other person knows what they're thinking, and that you can consent to how much time it's going to take and what it might involve. And if it's a teacher-student relationship, or if it's, you know, a quick water cooler meeting, or yeah, I would like you to use the best that you have to lead me through a Socratic method that might take an hour, but I would love to experience that, just like reading a book, right? Those are 3 different conversations. And to just assume somebody wants one of them, I think has been a big problem I've seen here. So the best thing that we've done, I've seen so far, is schedule a Saturday, have somebody set the premise, everybody consents to come, and we do what Glenn said, which I've been saying over and over again myself. We give feedback, and if it's criticism, keep it friendly, you know? And if it's something really harsh and you don't know how the person might take it, maybe you could contact them privately. You know, this isn't the all be all of everything has to be recorded. That's the ridiculous thing. And I'm willing to take my time to not say anything and wait a month or 2 until maybe the idea comes back around again, because other people have stuff to talk about. So if you guys don't know what I'm talking about fair conversations. What do they look like? They look like consent. They look like the right container. They look like premise. And I'll just leave it there because it's so much fun to be clear.
So that's why you're here. Now I understand why you keep showing up to all these Saturday meetings, because I feel like fair conversation is what we talk about here almost every time. It's, when we don't have a scheduled topic, it always moves into this meta communication space.
Think about it, Glenn. Barry doesn't know what it means, so I might be onto something. Because Barry, yeah, we might be onto something.
By the way, I don't know if Colin noticed. Colin was responding to Stacy. Stacy had to leave in the middle of Colin's response to her. Now, I would have said to Stacy, can you paraphrase what you heard Colin say since he was talking to you? But I can't because she left about 4 minutes ago.
Yeah, no, it wasn't really so much my response to her. I did respond to her and then she left. My response was, it wasn't so much the cart was backwards, cart before the horse, or in the wrong order. It was more that you want to set the premise and make sure the person is there and present with why they're there before you start saying, asking me to bake a loaf of bread, asking me some, questions about optometry. I don't know. Maybe you want to ask me some questions about the Big Bang. Jazz thought I knew a lot about the Big Bang there for a while. That's like, okay, that's entertaining, but why are we here? And we can be here just to play too, right? We can be here to play.
That reminds me of something Neil Davidson said once. He was in one of his meetings, that if you're going to do a check-in And especially in the context of global challenges, which is a big topic and very serious topic, and he takes it very seriously, then you should begin by saying why you're here in the check-in, and and say it like from the depth, right? Not just some superficial thing, but to really say why you're here. Maybe he's right. Maybe that is something that will elevate the whole thing.
Look at Sam and Doug, two people that aren't here. Sam's kind of here. Two people who are spearheading what used to be something that is no longer, in my mind. It's evolved. It's changed. There's been siloing happening. Sam ditched Doug again last week because Doug's making rules. It's not a group that Sam's thinking about in that regard. So way back 2 years ago, when I was getting on my first kick, which is fair conversations under the term of what are you doing with your life as far as a journey, and can you define that? So that's the journey map, which turned into, okay, well, when I'm discussing things with people, we have to define our terms because people don't share the same terms. So while I'm discussing what a journey is, or, you know, what it would be to use agile, or to map out, you know, an alignment plan of, you know, where do you think you're going and why? You know, what dynamic repositories do you have? What kind of conversations are you involved in? You know, that kind of a journey map, as you know, whether it's academic, going to university, whether it's, you know, you're involved with local groups, or whether in Uganda, right? That's a different conversation with somebody in Uganda, right? And Ties is telling me about these things. Tease is telling me about these things in Uganda. So they're different conversations. So what I learned was you can't assume that this is going to go well. You can't assume that people are going to listen to you and say, oh yeah, and we should do this. Like Stacy's hoping yes, and like impromptu or improv. It's actually, you've got to go into protection mode and getting ready mode. And in protection mode, why would you do that, Barry? Well, because people are going to manipulate the conversation. So you don't even have the proper framework to present. You don't have the right stage. It's icy and it's slanted, and you got 2 minutes, and then the show isn't. You don't have any follow up for 2 weeks. Nobody really cares because it's not something that we see a commitment towards as far as Trello or any of these things. So there's been plenty of opportunity. I've done some things, but I think this is just a nice group for honest people, whatever that is, to get together and think about doing things better. To me, this is a think tank. That's what it's turned into. It's probably what I saw in the first place. A think tank about global challenges. And I'm thinking that if Sam and Doug can't even discuss what an agreement is, then I could use my idea of trying to have a fair conversation to say, okay, Doug, what do you mean by the word agreement? Okay, Sam, what do you mean by the word agreement? Okay, does anybody see anything wrong with the other person's definition of agreement? Okay, Sam, what is it you're looking for behind the word agreement that you would think that Doug would do? Doug, what is it behind the word agreement that you're resisting that you think Sam is going to make you do? Like, why are we having this problem about this word agreement? They kind of did that themselves and worked it out, but does anybody remember the conclusion? Was it mapped out in a way we could remember and add a new thing? Or where Sam could say, I changed my mind. I want to change node 5 because I don't believe that anymore. And I'm changing the way I think. And that's coming out recently with the idea of facts don't lead the way. Story does. And that's a big thing Barry's into, right? Bebe was into story. So I think helping each other get our story straight is what's really gets the platform in the right direction for a fair conversation. If somebody doesn't know why you're there or what you're going to present, or you've got a stigma as the guy that gives examples about God, right? Like everybody thinks I'm trying to get rid of God. No, I'm trying to figure out why people want to believe that stuff. And right. And when you use it, what do you mean when you're using it? So if it's just ethical stories, then that's one thing. If it's actually the way that, you know, Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris and Dawkins and all these other atheists who are actually fighting the fight against bad ideas, then that's another discussion. I don't think we have that discussion here. I use examples of that discussion here. And that examples of that discussion flows over into starting the discussion. That's a mistake. The discussion shouldn't get started. And with Barry, it got started. And Barry and I now see eye to eye on the fact that he sees the biblical stories as ethics, not as actual, literal. And that's important when you're discussing in a global challenges forum with somebody. If they're going to use that for stories, maybe they should take God out of it. They can defend it if they want to. I have the right to challenge it. I'm not being negative or hurtful or a hidden agenda. And so for people to think that I want to cause disruption because I'm pointing that out, right? So I think that's way over my time limit, but we're in the after show, and I wait for this.
Thies, did you have something you want to say, or yes, Sam?
Yes,
You have to
I
unmute.
see Sam has his hand raised. So I wanted Sam
it down.
to hear to Sam and then to quit, but then Colin went on a rant. So I
Sam
thought
never took
first I want to hear Sam reacting, and then I wanted to leave. But Colin started to talk 10 minutes or more. I don't know.
It might
Yeah, no,
be that-
Sam left. That's why I wouldn't have done that
the
otherwise.
hand is still up.
Yeah,
I
he's
think,
gone though.
Yeah. if
Sorry,
put
Ties, you
hand
should have
up-
interrupted sooner with your concern if you had that concern. I don't want you sitting there waiting, buddy.
Oh, he's gone.
But
Okay.
it's an interesting thing, though. This with defining our terms and stuff, and also sort of why are some opinions or some criticisms, why do they make me react? Like, for example, I've been listening quite a lot to Sam Harris, and I really like the guy. I like the way he speaks, his calm voice, and sort of his very clear thinking in some situations. But then there's a few moments when, especially when he speaks about free will, I really kind of pisses me off a little bit, because he's using this strange philosophical definition of free will, which is based on thought experiments about turning back time and whether you could have done differently and all kinds of things, and then sort of ends up concluding that the whole thing is an illusion. And I think that's actually an example of a bad idea, in my opinion, because it's, it's
Let's put it in
almost
perspective.
unethical. It's almost unethical to make that argument, because you're basically saying that we're not responsible for our decisions. And that's maybe why I'm reacting, because if he was right that free will doesn't exist, then I can say I have no responsibility for anything I did. Fuck it,
I think
doesn't matter.
I think he would no. I think he was doing it the way you do it. He's giving himself extra constraints. As you said earlier, you have a higher standard of behavior that you're holding yourself to than other people. I think I heard Sam say that he holds himself to a higher level of grace to forgive people for what they do, because he knows that this. But you're right. I have a problem with that too. And in perspective, if we jump one level out from that, that's the Big Bang discussion, or the consciousness discussion, or the infinity discussion. There's several of these discussions that are very interesting for philosophers, but I don't think they're very interesting for global challenge collaborators.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because the way I see it is that these global challenges are all connected, and it has to do with worldviews, and it has to do with truth. And I would be really enthusiastic if we could manage to have a real discussion from first principles on certain of these really difficult topics that philosophers have struggled with for thousands of years. And that's why it really pisses me off when a guy like Lawrence Krauss writes a book and calls the book Universe from Nothing. Why?
Well, hold it right there, Glenn. If it really pisses you off, I see fire in your belly for starting that philosophy show. Like Alex started Wisdom Wednesdays. You don't have to do it every day. You could produce it. It doesn't have to be live. You could go look at footage.
Yeah.
You could go look at footage from the top 3 mentors that you have, or 5 mentors in free will discussion, Dan Dennett and the rest of them. And you could present their
Dennett
ideas.
has a lot of good ideas.
And you could frame that conversation. And that is what I'm talking about. Fair conversations take time. They're quality. You have to be able to, and you can't have a fair conversation in one sitting, really, not of any substance. It's like, it's a thing. I don't know. Fair conversations is really a red herring to say, grow up and care about what you're talking about and put the right effort into it. But who has the time, right? Like, everybody isn't right involved in politics, but I do see something. If that's a fire for you, then that's something I could support you in. I could even show up at that show once in a while, but that would leave your contributions to barn raising to be more about what may be the essence of what barn raising is, which I'm saying, I can't tell you what it is, but I don't think having a conclusion about free will or about the Big Bang is really going to cause what I'm here for, which in the end is coexistence, right? Like, how are we going to coexist with people? And some of the things that are influencing me are like the book Sapiens by Harari, right? World history, written from other places than the United States, you know, like listening to
I
Noam.
think Alex has some.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, guys.
But philosophy explains how we got here, but not why. So Harari's book Sapiens is like that a bit. It goes into some detail about how we got here and the nuts and bolts and the physics, but not the why. The spiritual part's left out. But I get attacked for having a Wednesday wisdom show. I get attacked by some people who are claiming that there's only bad ideas and good ideas, and then better ideas. There's no wisdom. So wisdom is based on a person's biased perceptions. So I have to deal with that sort of situation too, by trying to remain humble, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's like Joel. He's got a whole different feeling of what existence is. Like, he jumps on the game with the word existence, and I can't find any place to align with that as a global challenge project. It's complete philosophy, and that would be, where I think Glenn might have one of his number 1 guests, getting to the bottom of what Joel's getting into.
Well,
and
one thing Joel has mentioned is that the culture that we have today in the world is a culture which does not acknowledge wisdom. And it doesn't acknowledge that some people may have wisdom and maybe even objective knowledge. And that it's almost like a culture that's allergic to any real objective truth. It just wants to conflate everything and wants to say, oh, it's all relative. And
not just conflate. I think it's the story, it's the narrative, it's the emotions that drive the human species. It's the tribes, and we may still have hunter-gatherer facilities in our biology, but for the last X thousands years, 10,000 years, we've been becoming farmers, and now we're, it's just quite amazing to think of all the possibilities. And you do that, Glenn. Like, you really do think about the future. And there's besides the movie Sapiens, has anybody seen the documentary Introspection? Is that what it's called?
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, I got a ping from somebody recently.
I've seen Interstellar, but that's a totally different.
No, I think I'm cutting the word. I think it's longer than that. But it goes in.
Why the reason I was triggered by Lawrence Krauss is basically because it comes across to me as disingenuous. It actually touches on this issue with hidden agenda, that his real agenda seems to me to be to sell a book and get attention. And then he covers it up in some obscure scientific jargon And then he pretends that that jargon has something to do with why there is something rather than nothing, when in fact he doesn't even address that question. Because everything he talks about presupposes something already happening. But that's just an example, but I think it's a good example of, you know, the kind of things that, well, it makes me react for sure.
Who's that, Glenn? Who was that?
Lawrence Krauss, have you heard about him?
No.
Well, he's a physician or astrophysicist, sort of a bit of an entertainer guy, maybe one would say, but he wrote a book which was called A Universe from Nothing, Why There Is Something Rather Than Nothing. And when he was pushed on the issue, I heard a debate he had with philosophers. It actually turned out he wasn't even speaking about the issue of why there is something rather than nothing. And he even said he doesn't even care about that question. That's like philosophers can talk about that, right? And his entire theory actually presupposes a multi-universe, which is probably infinite and eternal. That was his own words. So if he has a theory that is built on an idea of an infinite, eternal multi-universe, even though he doesn't like talking about it, which he doesn't, but that's what it's based on. And then he calls that book A Universe from Nothing. Like, that comes across to me as very disingenuous communication and a very stupid argument, basically, because it's like the exact opposite of what he's actually saying. And I haven't read the book, and I'm not going to either, but I've heard him speak about the subject. So, yeah. Did that ring any bell for you, Sam?
To me, it sounds like a very similar non-argument when I come up with someone who presupposes God and then tries to convince me about God. Now, I know this is, Colin's topic, but yeah, I mean, if somebody just accepts, Colin, I know I put words in your mouth, okay?
I disagree, but then you know what? You know me.
So anyway, yeah, I mean, if somebody comes and says, I'm going to talk to you about God, but oh, by the way, I've already presupposed that God exists, I don't know how to get into that conversation. I really don't.
But here's a great example, since I mentioned Lawrence Krauss. I heard him have a debate with Lane Craig, who's a professor and a theologian, and they discussed this issue of, where does everything come from? And they had 3 discussions. Each of them lasted 1.5 hours. And as far as I could tell, they didn't even come upon the main point, which was that the word God refers to a mystery. And the word multi-universe, which Krauss used, also refers to a mystery. In fact, it refers to something which by its very nature is totally beyond human comprehension. Not like a little bit. We're not talking like a 10-dimensional chess here. We're not talking 1,000-dimensional chess. We're talking wildly beyond human comprehension.
Just one word though, consciousness. Now continue.
Yeah, and obviously the origin of consciousness is another question, but what would this is something I just think it's strange. Why did people have these discussions about whether or not God exists without even coming to the point of what are we even speaking about?
God adds consciousness to it, though. That's the thing. God adds agency to different levels depending on what label you're looking for.
We don't really know what consciousness is either, right? That's also very mysterious.
The mind of God, or just no God. Choose one.
Like let's say that there's a consciousness that's so different from ours that we wouldn't even call it consciousness. or let's say it's an intelligence, but should we even call it an intelligence? It's something that's so strange. It can't even communicate with us, perhaps.
And the juxtapose for me is, what does that have to do with, say, fair conversations or global warming?
Well, it has to do with clarifying what we mean with the words we use.
I don't know. If to ask
Question.
questions we can't answer and then stop doing anything because we can't agree, I think is foolhardy.
We can't answer them. We can understand why we can't.
We can map out the fact that we have reached this impasse, and does it actually matter to what our intentions are in the now? Is it just an entertainment activity? Because we got together and gave 5-6 hours to the idea of infinity. I had a lot of fun. I came up with the idea that the universe bounces.
By the way, Alex is absent for a while.
And then Barry, I told Barry, and
right.
Barry told me about this other physicist, Jan, what's his name? Really interesting fella. Siegel, I think his name is Siegel.
Ethan Siegel.
Ethan Siegel. Anyway, go ahead, Alex.
There's a saying by this great Greek philosopher. He said, if is God willing to prevent evil but not able, then he is not impotent, omnipotent. Yeah, and if he's able but not willing, then he is malevolent. And if he is both able and willing, then where does evil come from? So if he's neither able nor willing to prevent evil, why call him God? Why not call it the intelligent designer or some higher power we don't know about? Some higher power that can transform us if we accept the fact that it exists without trying to deny it. Over.
Not touching that with the 10-foot pole, the 10-foot pole.
So I'll go back to a comment that Glenn made about God being a mystery and that multi-universes are also mysteries. Yeah, I think they are mysterious. However, the difference being, with a lot of people trying to understand the universe, we take it as a given that we can learn more about the universe. We can observe, measure, experiment, hypothesize, etc. And gradually, the borders of our knowledge, if you want to use that metaphor, proceeds to expand and get into new territory. That does not appear to be the case with God, unless Barry instructs me on what real theology really is. But if they're both mysteries, and one is amenable to exploration and investigation and learning, and the other is not, then either I'm mistaken that it's not, in which case let's go ahead and apply our same exploration to the notion of God, or if it's not, why waste our time on it?
Well, what you mean, why will we engage with a mystery? That's an interesting question. I have some thoughts about that. But
I have no issue engaging with mysteries so long as there's something that be gained, something that can be experienced by engagement with that mystery, okay? But if you cannot distinguish between this mystery and that mystery, then let's just use one term for it.
But what if the whole point is that you can engage with it, you can have a sort of an experience of a contact with it or part of it, but it's just entirely impossible to use words to describe it.
What if that contact and the experience, sorry, Barry, is misinterpreted? What if it's extreme hunger? What if it's extreme dehydration? What if it's extreme joy? What if it's extreme anything that one is not familiar with and therefore does not know how to describe?
Well, let's take the example of so-called psychedelic experiences, or some of these. I don't know how much experience you guys have with it. I don't have much, but a little bit. And suffice to say that, the time that I did drink this ayahuasca, I experienced some stuff which, would be utterly impossible to put into words. And, if I try to explain it to someone who hasn't experienced it themselves, then either they will understand nothing at all, and everything I say will sound like total nonsense. That's probably the best case. Or they will mistakenly associate it with some of their own pre-existing experiences and reduce what I say to that pre-existing experience. So this, I think, is a very deep issue that has to do with communication and whether it's actually even possible to communicate something truly new. Like I can communicate the idea of a house with a car on the roof and a person sitting inside of the car, right? Because you already have an idea of what a house is, you have an idea of what a car is, you have an idea of what a person is, you can sort of put it together in your mind. So yeah, up to a point, we can communicate something new. But what if the house, the car, the person in the car, everything is just totally different from anything we've experienced in normal life. Like the whole fabric of reality is just somehow of a different nature. That's some of the issues that come up in some of these experiences that people have had, so-called transcendental experiences. And those experiences are sometimes associated with a sense of a connection with a greater intelligence. Sometimes it is referred to with these words like God and higher levels and so on. But it's a very deep problem here that it just can't be communicated, it seems. It's like the myth of the cave, right? How could the person who comes back into the cave communicate to the people who have only seen shadows on the wall and tell them, well, I just saw three-dimensional objects. I just saw fire. I just felt the heat from the sun and the sky and the trees. And they have only seen shadows. They have no conceptions that anything like that exists. So whatever he's going to say to them, they're just going to interpret it as different combinations of shadows on the wall. So it somehow seems to be almost like an insolvable communication problem. The only way that you can actually figure it out is to just turn around and walk out of the cave and experience it yourself. And then maybe if two people have experienced it, then they can talk because they have yeah, does this make sense?
It does. But I think the difference here is that person who went outside can still say, hey, come with me, we can go and I can show you. Now,
but then they're going to say, why should I do that?
Well, that's okay, closed-mindedness, okay? But if someone is open-minded, they would say, okay, fine, I'll come with you. Now, if what you're saying is, I won't understand you until I drink some ayahuasca, I say, fine, great, let's go do it. And if that experience is repeatable, then that's observable, that's, describable, and then we can probably have a conversation about it. Now, the other difference is, though, if somebody says, pray and God will speak to you, is that as repeatable? I don't know.
Well, there's another issue too. One thing is it's maybe easy to take some ayahuasca, but what if what you need to do involves 30 years of living in a certain way? Like even Sam Harris has talked about this, that's a bigger ask, Yeah, if you change your entire way of living, you join a spiritual community, you meditate and pray and sing and read these and those books, and you do all kinds of stuff, and you do it with really pure intent and total sincerity and passion, and you do it for 30 years, maybe then you will know what this is about, right? That's not so easy to just say, okay, come with me, right?
But we can still apply the same reasoning. I can still say, okay, if it does take 30 years, then let me find some other people who have spent those 30 years. Now, their very existence would say, yes, there's something repeatable here. If there is no one who has done that, that has chosen to spend that 30 years, then we're kind of at an impasse.
But there's also another problem, and that is that what about all those people who say that they've gone through this and say that they've experienced this great thing, but they're just crazy? Or maybe they're semi-crazy. Maybe they have experienced something, and then they come back and they add on to it all kinds of other subjective stuff that has nothing to do with it.
Right.
And maybe they even turn mad because they can't deal with what they saw. It was too intense, right? It's a very tricky issue. It's tricky.
Alex has had his hand up for a while.
Harry's going before me.
Have you ever had a lucid dream, especially after imbibing or taking an hallucinogen? There are people who will take, how do you pronounce it, ayahuasca or whatever, mind-altering drug, and some people will have kind of lucid dreams. They'll visualize some, fabulous, like a Peter Max poster, these psychedelic images. And most neuroscientists will tell you, oh, you've done it, okay. Most neuroscientists will tell you that in your dream sleep, or if you're having a kind of a lucid visualization, that it's mostly coming out of the right hemisphere, the hemisphere that doesn't have language, but it has imagination, imagery, nonverbal stuff. And so there are people who are fabulous artists. They will have sort of like a lucid dream or a visualization, and then they'll take pen to paper or the music, and they'll represent this stuff nonverbally in an image, a painting, a sculpture, a piece of music, poetry, whatever. And it's not complete sentences in a language like English, but it's a representation of something that they perceived nonverbally, typically in a dreamlike state. So, and that's reproducible. I think you can, like, for example, if I had any artistic skill, which I don't, I could draw pictures of what I dreamt about, and they would be funky looking images, semi-recognizable, sort of throwing pictures together that don't normally belong, collages. But I don't do that because I don't have any artistic talent. But I can maybe narrate a dream, but not very well, because if I try to narrate a dream, I really lose sort of the big picture. So that's one thing about what the right hemisphere can do. And we have one. Everybody knows you have a right hemisphere. Everybody knows you can have vivid, lucid dreams. And if you try to describe a dream after you wake up, you struggle to put it into words. But nonetheless, it was a real visualization. I want to get back to something that Sam said. One of my favorite scientists is Carl Sagan. And Carl Sagan, as you know, did a popular series on public television called Cosmos. And he went into the dictionary and took this word, cosmos, which is a word in the dictionary. It's a perfectly good English word. And he gave it a definition, which he repeated at the beginning of every episode. He says, the cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. He repeated that definition every single week that he did that series. Now, the phrase, all that is, or ever was, or ever will be, can be repeated in other languages. And in fact, you can find one of the oldest times it was written down in a different language. You can find it written in Hebrew in the book of Exodus. And this is a story where Moses is talking to God. He's a young man, and he's trying to figure out what he's supposed to do with his life. He says, I'm no longer a child. I'm no longer an adolescent. I've got to figure out what's my role in life. He goes for a walk in the desert to try to collect his thoughts. And he has this conversation with his deity, his higher power. And he says, by the way, if I'm going to follow the guidance that I'm getting from this higher power, I'm going to have to tell the people, who was my counselor? Where did I get this from? What's your name? Give me a name by which I can refer to you. And in Hebrew, I am all that is, or ever was, or ever will be, which is a very long phrase. So then you telescope it down into an acronym, a 4-letter acronym in Hebrew. As you expand it, is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. And that acronym, that 4-letter acronym in Hebrew, is the name of the deity of Moses, which if you try to pronounce it in English, it comes out Yahweh, but it's like saying Jiffik for JFK. You don't really pronounce it, it's just an acronym. So the deity of Moses is identical to the definition of cosmos for Carl Sagan, literally the same words. Now, all that, so I revere, I have admiration and respect and reverence for all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. And there's another version of it, Que sera, sera. What will be, will be. It's a song that Doris Day sang in a movie and became the most famous song of her career. Que sera, sera. What will be, will be. Okay, here's 3 versions of the same sentiment in 3 languages in 3 different epochs of time in 3 different cultures. And you cannot deny that what will be, will be. It's not a very good prediction because it doesn't actually predict anything, but it's certainly true. You can't deny it. I'll stop.
It's true in the sense of the room you're in. You look around the room you're in and look at the objects in that room. They're in the real world. They're real world objects. I've got a guitar over there and it's got a fret buzz. If I don't replace that fret, that string will buzz every time I pick it up and play until I do the work on it. That's a real world object and it doesn't change unless I have a decision to do some work on it. So, but if I go out of the real world and look back into my mind, looking in the other direction, there's a different situation because that's not the real world. That's where the rabbit hole is. And that's what
I will dream, I will dream. What I imagine, I will imagine. If I dream or imagine something, is that real?
Yeah.
It's
well,
a
the
phenomenon
ayahuasca,
that took place in my
It's a real event, right?
the ayahuasca, the man in your brain who directs your thoughts to control them is put to sleep by this drug ayahuasca.
I think it wakes it up. I think that
it gets him out of the way. It gets him out of the way. He's pushed aside. He's pushed aside.
So the right brain can have its day, in the sun. And some people imagine things and then they'll go out and build it. They will imagine this beautiful resort that they can visualize that doesn't yet exist. It's simply an imagination. And then they'll go out and build a functional model of it. And then they'll build a bigger model of it, and then a real working version of it. Leonardo imagined a helicopter, tried to build it.
That means imagination is a real thing.
Right.
There's nothing unreal about imagination.
Exactly.
As you say, it influences.
When I've got an open mind, I can see down this rabbit hole. And if I take a mood-altering substance like psychedelic, I can see down all the rabbit holes at once and pick which one I want to have a closer look in. When I'm not intoxicated, that little man who's the director, the navigator of my thoughts, he's wide awake and he's controlling things. Over.
Yeah. So people can imagine things that don't exist, and they can sometimes, if they're a good engineer, or a good artist, they'll make them exist. They'll create I got a painting sitting right up here. I think it's a Picasso, and it's a picture of a vase of flowers, except it's very stylized, and it's a real trapunta, a print on fabric that an artist visualized and then reduced to real material. It's really there on the wall.
So if we imagine, if humanity, let's say, begins to imagine a society which is much better than the one we've had
Right.
till now,
Right.
then that act of imagination could in itself create a path to build that society.
Right.
Maybe.
That's what engineers do. Engineers can imagine something doesn't exist. So Steve Jobs imagines a device that's both a telephone and a tiny little handheld computer that can talk wirelessly, both data and internet and telephone. He imagines this thing that doesn't exist. And then he marshals resources and a hell of a lot of smart people and a lot of money, and he builds it. And now you guys all own one.
But then imagination, can we say that imagination is a real event? It's not real as it's not like a thing or like an object. And if I imagine that I have $1 million in the bank, then it's a real event that happens, and it is consequential because it can influence my behavior, my action, and that can influence others. So there seems to be a direct connection between the world of imagination and the world of material manifestation, or whatever you want to call it.
Did you watch Kayla cooking in the kitchen? She was making a recipe. You saw she had a bowl and some ingredients. Now, at one time, that dish that she was making, and I don't know what it was, but at one time that dish didn't exist. Somebody imagined a combination of foodstuffs to make a dish, and there's Kayla reducing it to practice. Now, maybe it's a dish that she invented, or maybe it's when she got out of a recipe book, but somebody imagined it and then wrote it down, and then somebody could say, you can make this.
Yeah. So it's a creative force.
Creative process. And we engage in the creative process, I won't say every day, we have some off days, okay? But we can create things that never existed.
Yeah.
And the creative process does exist. Not only does the creative process exist, but the creative spirit, the drive to be creative. I'm bored and I want to do something. I'm going to say, oh, I'm going to write an essay. I'm going to make a drawing. I'm going to go in the kitchen and make a dish that's I've never made before. You can have a motivated drive to be creative. I want to make good art. I've got an experience that I really, I have a good grief. I had a terrible experience yesterday. I want to process that terrible experience. I want to make good art. I'm going to write a song parody, or I'm going to do something, to process that experience and turn it into something more tangible that I can share. And maybe you say, well, Barry, why did you write that song parody? Because I had a bad experience yesterday. I wanted to process it, get it out of my system, get it off my chest, put it to bed. Or I had a dream and I wanted to, turn the dream into something tangible. Creativity is real.
Colin, did you have something you want to say, or seem like you?
Yeah, no, I didn't want to interrupt your flow
Did I
there.
put Alex to sleep? I think I put Alex to sleep.
he's just chilling, I guess.
I put Alex to sleep. How could I do that?
He's chilling
What
in
time
the
do we got?
jungle.
Three. So we got another hour if we so choose, because we try to keep it to 4 hours so we get the transcripts. That's a long meeting, but
Kayla's gone too, I see from the participant list.
I don't mind hanging out because I'm doing work here at the same time and I can listen. But if it gets really intense, it
Stacy's in
distracts
the
me.
shower.
So
Stacey said she may come back.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm here. I had
Oh,
my hand
Stacy.
up about
Right,
half
right.
hour ago, but I put it down. We
Oh,
passed
well,
that.
put it back up
I'm here.
again, Stacy.
No,
Like
no, I
I'm
don't have
having trouble with that too,
anything
but okay.
Stacy
Well, I
probably
do.
hasn't dried her hair yet from getting out of the shower.
Yeah, I'm off camera for the rest of this.
I'm guessing you got a towel around your head right now.
Wrong.
Well, bad.
So dream if you want, Barry. So
Actually,
the
I'd
deal,
rather see
Glenn.
Stacy with her full head of hair, not with a towel.
Yeah, go. Yeah, keep going, Colin. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good banter. So I think I'm going to keep with the theme of, and not to annoy anybody, but to try to define what a fair conversation means in the light of what we've been discussing. See if we can't actually come up with tools to help define the context of what it is I'm seeing. And I don't think it's that unique or special. I think the fair conversation about this mysterious thing that can be considered to be God, or just the mysteriousness of the origin of existence. And I mean existence including all matter, not just life existence, but material existence as well. So existence of all, right? That question is wrought with, as Sam was saying, indecisive handles. You can't stick a handle onto it and expect that handle to be fairly placed. So you can say, I have the right handle, and your handle is you try it. You can use your handle, but you will find you can't predict anything with your handle, and your handle will not be reliable. And you'll eventually have to admit that your handle is no better than a guess. Handle on the situation is what I'm talking about. So the premise, what is the premise? If you can walk up to something and define it in a way that everybody agrees, then maybe you can start to unwrap the nuance of it. But if you can't even get to that, and that's where I find that we're not even getting to that with Sam and Doug when it came to the word agreement, although I should search through, because I remember Sam said, fall off my chair, or Doug said, fall off my chair. So I could search for that in the transcripts and find the point where Doug and Sam actually agreed about something. So that was naturally, without being coerced by me doing a moderation, by getting them to define their terms. And, you know, it does break the flow, but I think they've had 3 or 4 kicks at the can. Now it's time that if anybody's interested in seeing what I'm talking about, let's put together a little game called My Show, My Moderation for today. And I'm going to moderate Doug and Sam, who've agreed to participate, to try to come to some agreements. First, we're going to start with what the word agreement means. So that would have been the idea. But when I thought everybody saw what I wanted to do. Like, is that clear? Is that manipulative? No, it's just, I want to help moderate that discussion because they're failing at it. It's not serving the group well. We're not getting any definitions. So if I'm here about trying to map out the context, the journey, or what it boils down to in the metaphysical world is a fair conversation, right? Are you looking at the facts right? When you're talking about the deities and stuff, you can't get the facts right. So you can't get the handlebar on the conversation. All you can do is map out your opinion, what evidence you think you have, state how strong you think that evidence is, and any references to any academic work that has actually been put into that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of potential useful scientific work that doesn't get done. That's called the unfinished science. And we talked about that before, and that came from that documentary I was watching. What the heck was that? But it really riled up some emotions in me, because that was where they brought up the term about the manufacturing of misinformation, and the study of the manufacturing of misinformation was the actual word I'm talking about. Let me think. It's an ology word. Do you remember what it is, Barry? Okay. Yeah. Agnotology. That's it. Agnotology. Because, you know, and agno is a very important word, because agnostic or Gnosticism and belief and faith, all those words are all mixed up and confused. And just when you're talking to somebody, general conversation, you might as well forget about it. Because are you talking about what you know? Are you talking about what you believe? Are you talking what you got faith? Right? Knowledge and belief go together, but faith doesn't fit in that. Like which one of these things is not like the other? Faith is not like the others. Right? Belief is the top level. Belief, you believe that things are possible, and then you test things and you say, you know what, this gravity thing, it happens. I'm going to call that a fact. So I'm going to say, I know gravity is happening to me every day, predictably. I know that. Can I say it's always going to do that? Like Einstein says, well, no, it can change if something happens. But realistically, free will speaking, gravity is a fact. So it's a knowledge underneath the belief that gravity might exist. but I don't have faith in gravity. That's ridiculous. And as soon as you have decent enough evidence for something, you can no longer call it faith, because at that point, and I'm talking about the if you're going to define terms with me, you got to be very careful about the word faith. Now, if we're just talking regular conversation, I'm not going to challenge you if you're going to say faith or belief or knowledge or whatever. So at what level do we nitpick the conversation? And I find it most frustrating when you can nitpick all you want and you can't get anywheres, because there is no place to stick the handle. And that is the religious conversation. Right?
That's the
So
whole
the best,
point.
well, the
That's the
best thing
whole
we can do is
point.
map up. The best thing we can do is label. Like today, I wanted to interrupt and say, Glenn, your idea of giving people useful feedback as the most important thing we might be able to do here at the group for each other. And Stacy was saying, ask questions of each other. Like, this is what I'm looking for, this interaction about ideas. So I want to interrupt you and say, oh, Glenn, if that's so important, why can't we just give that a name? And so that we don't have to keep repeating the fact that we need it. We can say, where is it that we have labeled that we need? You know, why don't we put that in the guidelines? We are here questing for this thing Glenn is talking about. I will never have to say it again. I've said it 100 times. You said it again today. How frustrating is that? And then it turns into a conversation about the mysterious God and things like that. So as a fair conversation moderator, I could come in and say, number one, are you doing what Sam did when he started the conversation? He said, everybody give me what you might like to talk about. And I also have some things I would like to talk about. We'll do what you want, or not, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do today, but, or I've got some things. I'm still curious about what it is that Sam wanted to talk about. And when I did my show on religion, remember I did a show on religion one day in science and it kind of went to shit and Jazz was there. But my main point was we could talk about this, or we could talk about something better.
But that show was a show about meta communication, just like all the others. We never.
Right, but my point wasn't about the fact it was meta conversation. My point was we can talk about religion where we can't get any handlebars on it, and we can choose to do that, and everybody seems to want to do that. Or we can step back, like Alex was saying, and look at the different rabbit holes and say, can we choose a different rabbit hole that might be more effective and useful? And that's what I'm trying to say. I've got oars that I want to talk about. So if you guys all want to talk about the Big Bang every week, I'm not getting what I want, but I am, I'm getting some, community effects. And I feel, it's nice to rely on these people and it's something to do on Saturday. But I also do have that urge to experience what it might be to be understood. And that urge is to be able to have people respect what a fair conversation is and take part in one. So when I'm in a conversation with Doug in Sunday and Sam left because he said, Doug just pulled the fair conversation out from underneath my feet, I do not want to participate where I think the conversation is no longer fair. Doug made decisions. Now, Gertrude, she has a whole thing on Friday. If she doesn't do it with her method, then she won't end up with the cake at the end. If she's trying to bake a cake isn't going to come out unless she puts the ingredients in like Kayla was doing. So Gertrude has a recipe, but I think that's a recipe of a child that's born from GCC. It's not GCC. The most important topic today is, are we losing barn raising and the unblocking synergy? Has Gertrude floated off into mentoring land? And we've lost Friday experiments. And now we've gained Wisdom Wednesdays. Are we going to gain Philosophical Tuesdays with Glenn? Like, are these the things we want? Is this the kind of feedback mechanism that we need? Because I would hope Glenn would go make his philosophical show, but also come back and still take part in barn raising like we intended in the beginning. So if you start your philosophical show, don't try to twist barn raising into your philosophical show.
But the thing is, like, I studied.
Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah, look, I studied philosophy a little bit, and that's not really what I'm interested in. I'm interested in truth, actual objective truth, and figuring out if there are some things that we know with absolute certainty. That's one question. And
God isn't one of those.
well, it seems to me the one thing I know with most certainty of all things is that something is happening.
I don't-
Is that there is action, there is
Very simple.
events, right? And that's interesting because maybe that relates to consciousness, maybe it relates to all that is and all that has been. But the point is that at some point we have to also figure out how to speak about something mysterious. Alex, yeah, go ahead.
There's a question that comes up about fair conversations and the science of gravity.
Hello.
Even if I don't understand the science, when I know that if I drop this cup, it'll hit the floor and probably break. I have faith in that. So I can use the word faith in that respect without causing anybody to get offended. And so the fact that some people have faith in their deity or their mysterious higher power, that's their process. I can't criticize their process. It's their thing. If they want to explain it to me, because I don't understand it, I ask them, what is this deity, is what its highest power you're talking about? What is it? And the person will usually say it's something I have faith in. It's something that I've trusted, and it's always been there for me. But I say, well, prayer, the power of prayer isn't something that works, and they've done studies, double-blind tests of people in hospitals who are suffering illness, the ones prayed for and the ones who weren't prayed for, and they've seen no result, no change in the outcomes. And there's other studies who have shown change in the outcomes, and who did those studies? When you look deeper into it, you find that one was a church organisation and one was a university studying science. So there's always a influence from the bias. You follow the money.
But seriously, is there anyone here that believes that prayer has no effect at all? Because that to me sounds like a very strange belief.
It does have an effect.
It's psychology, right? So psychology has an effect.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the effect that they think it does, but the fact that you're praying is going to have an effect because it's just, auto-suggestion.
How do any of you know? How do we know?
Because everything's
How-
changing all the time.
No. But what I'm saying is, we're saying why it has an effect. How do we know that's the whole answer? I mean, just having a thought. How do we know? I mean, there are scientists that are studying what happens around plants and energy and things like that. I personally don't have any firsthand knowledge, but my imagination tells me it is possible that when I have a thought, something is happening around me energetically.
Oh.
That could
You mean
create-
influencing you?
I have a thought.
No,
I
I'm
didn't
not
water my
talking
plants
about-
today. I better water them. That's a thought.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, okay, have you ever gone into a room and you feel the energy in the air?
Yeah, especially if there isn't any.
That's not what I'm saying.
Socially, yes.
If you've
Are
ever
you?
walked into a room where there's just been an argument and you
Okay.
walk into the room and it's silent, but you can feel an energy in that air. What is that? And I'm not giving an answer. I'm just saying,
It's
I
aromatic
take
peptides.
exception to
You can
anybody
smell it.
saying right now definitively what that means, because none of us know exactly what that means yet. One day we might.
I don't know. My only question is are you alone in the room after the people leave or not? Because you can read people when they're cold,
Yeah.
but
When
if they're
I-
gone,
I
and
saw
that's
some
what happened.
people-
Sam was cold to Doug the other day, and just boom, he was gone.
Right. So yes, I would say even if you're alone in the room, sometimes you
No,
could,
no.
some people, not everybody, there are people who can walk into a room and feel an energy. You might
Before
think
or
that's
after a drink of whiskey.
You can feel fear. Fear gives off pheromones. Dogs can sense fear. A lot of animals
Thank
can
you.
sense fear.
Yes.
And they give off
There could be something
pheromones.
here.
And some people say, I can smell, you can literally smell fear if you know what you're smelling. Bombasin, you could smell bombasin. It's wretched.
Oh, hormones. I'll let hormones go. Yeah, there's
No,
hormones,
but
definitely.
the point is, if a dog could smell it, there's something there.
Yes.
I saw two
That
close,
that I'll agree with, but it's
I saw two friends of mine.
quite mild. I don't know. I don't know.
They were chatting. These two friends of mine were chatting about something, and I was too far away to make out what they were saying. But then as I got closer, one of them laughed or something, and it struck me that they were talking about me. Immediately, the idea came into my head, oh, they're talking about me, you know, 'cause they'd seen me appear in the distance. And they said something. The other one laughed when he said something, and I couldn't hear what it was. But that's because of my persecution complex. They weren't talking about me at all. Over.
Going back to the idea of thoughts, all I'm saying is, I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just saying that I'd be more comfortable from a scientific point of view in saying we don't yet know for sure. I'm really tired of hearing, we know that can't be. No, you don't know it can't be.
I think they say we know it can't be yet. Hasn't been shown yet.
Don't know yet.
Or there's another version. Yeah, there's another.
There's a yet
version.
there, but the yet doesn't mean that you can just, walk out into traffic with your eyes closed.
Yet is the
There's
most.
another version also. The version is, this can't be put into a concept, therefore I'm pretending that it doesn't exist.
If I have the null model, that means I don't have a good model yet. Doesn't mean that no good model exists. I don't yet have a good model to explain X, Y, Z. Okay, doesn't mean it doesn't have an explanation. I just don't have a good model yet. I've told Colin and other people that sometimes my very best model is the null model because it makes no predictions, therefore makes no mistakes.
And it's not a 50-50 either, right?
If every model that's non-null makes terrible predictions, then my best model is the null model. Makes
And the
no
biggest-
That's a
predictions, it
good
makes
one.
mistakes.
The best way
Yeah.
to not make any mistakes is to do nothing.
But hold on. The thing that Barry's saying is interesting, the null model. It just means I don't know yet. And then some people will say, okay, well, let's jump into a simple, unfair conversation where I'm going to set up a dichotomy between what you don't know and the other possibility, which is a fallacy. So they set up a dichotomy. And then they go further and say, so if it's not that, and it's not that, we don't know, then it's a 50-50 between these two things. And you're already two nodes down an unfair conversation. And a lot of people have that feeling about religion. They say, well, you don't know, therefore it is or it isn't. Therefore it's a 50-50. Agnosticism is not 50-50.
Misconceptions precede accurate knowledge. People have lots and lots of misconceptions en route to a survivable model that's any good.
Right.
19 misconceptions, and eventually number 20, it's a sustainable model that makes decent predictions.
Yeah.
I
And
saw an
Glenn,
example.
go ahead, but Glenn and I have a long going disagreement about proof of concept of impossibilities. And I think this is the conversation right here. So if you want to give that another stab, I'm open to that, Glenn.
What do you mean proof of
POC. Remember, I keep
concept
typing POC. The POC is your burden, not
Yes,
mine.
well, this goes back to what I mentioned.
Sorry, not
earlier.
proof of concept. A burden of proof is what I'm trying to say. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So my argument is that burden of proof doesn't have any meaning if there is no idea whatsoever about what proof would be. It presupposes that there exists some notion of what proof would be.
Which is
so
the null
if-
model.
Yeah, so if you're
It's the null
asking-
model, right?
it's sort of like if you're asking for you're asking me for something, but you don't even know what you're asking me for. That's like show me-
No. I'm not asking you for something. You're trying to give me something and I don't see it. And that's the premise. You're making the claim. I'm not asking you for something that doesn't exist. Like I'm
What?
not asking you for a square circle.
I made one. What claim did I make? Are you thinking about?
The claim is that
who has the burden of proof in this example? So it's a meta claim. So you're saying if somebody, so start with
Proof
what
of a
Barry said.
mathematical Theorem?
No. So let's start with the null model. We don't know about something. Let's just say it's God, for example. We don't know if God exists or not as a real thing. Okay, that's what exist means.
We
Okay.
we don't know that the process of becoming exists. We don't believe that the process of coming is an existing phenomenon that you can observe.
I can't attach becoming to the idea of God.
That's the definition. The people who came up with the word also came up with the definition and wrote it down.
How about emergence? I'll settle with emergence.
Same deal.
Okay, I'll go with emergence, but no intelligent mind behind it at this point. But something's happening, changing. I'll agree with that. Things are vibrating,
Crocus
things are
comes up in
changing.
February,
Good.
emerges out of the ground.
Then we have something.
Yeah,
So
I
I'll agree with that.
But
And
continue,
I think there
Colin.
always was something. I think there always was something. But I don't know. How do I know? That's not a conversation I really want to have because I can't back it up. But the thing is, when we're talking about something like that I don't want to talk about because I don't know, somebody comes and says, well, you should know because just look around you. Look at all the beautiful trees and it's just so miraculous. There has to be a creator, the watchmaker fallacy, if you're following along.
Yeah,
And then I say, well, I don't see any reason why you're telling me that there has to be a creator. Now, hold on, Alex. I know you're. And so the point is, whose job is it to explain the situation? Is it the person who doesn't see a reason to believe it? Or it's the person who's suggesting it as a possibility?
Why should I believe the definitions that you write in Sam's glossary? You write a word down.
No.
Give a definition. Why the fuck should I believe that?
No, it's not that. What it is
It is that.
Glenn.
It's a word with a definition.
Wait.
Why should I believe a definition?
Wait.
Oh, go ahead, Sam.
Wait. What got Barry so angry?
Good question. I think
Barry,
it's.
what got
I
you
think
so
it's.
angry?
Very, yeah.
Wait.
That's not anger. That's just misrepresentation.
I'm asking Barry.
Asymmetrical, which is unfair. Asymmetrical is unfair. If you can write down a definition for a word that you want, then why can't I? Or anybody else?
Why can't? You can. What's the problem?
Because
No
then
problem.
he doesn't want to believe the other guys,
Colin.
then I don't want to believe his.
Colin finds it
That's fair.
unacceptable.
It's fair.
No.
If you don't want to believe my definition, then I don't want to believe yours. We're done.
Right, but that's
Okay.
not what proof of
Wait. Is anybody operating under the assumption that a definition in that spreadsheet must be accepted by anyone? Is anyone that mistaken? No, the whole intent of the spreadsheet was to collect different definitions, not to agree to them. It was to collect them for future conversation and possible elucidation. The fact that I put one in there doesn't mean you have to believe my definition. The fact that you put one in there doesn't mean I have to believe your definition. That's not implied or even any part of any ground rules. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. So I don't understand the vitriol or vehemence.
Because it's an assertion that the thing being defined doesn't exist, that the definition names nothing.
No, but the
So what?
question is,
So what?
why you so upset? Why
Exactly,
can't?
so what?
Because it's unfair. And he wants to be, he wants to have fair conversations. I say that's unfair.
Let's take the other point of view. So would it be fair if I do believe you?
Wait. Can we try
What would make it fair?
Colin, wait. Can we
Go ahead.
back off a little bit, okay?
Sure.
I don't think it's any longer about a specific definition. I think it's about what Barry feels is a wrong that's been done to him.
Yeah, maybe.
Now he feels that somebody's done him wrong. And I'm trying to figure out what that is. What is the wrong that you've been done to, Barry?
Mischaracterized.
Who characterized what?
You want to go into details? Because it could take a while.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so let's say.
By the way, sorry for doing this. Can I do this, by the way? Is everybody okay with me doing this?
I'm okay. It's in the after show. I do feel we're a little squished, and I don't think it's. I think
So
we have to be very summarizing. Why don't
I'm
we
just
set up what we would
asking
like to talk
Barry
about?
What got him so perturbed? that he
Yeah,
had
go
to be
ahead.
very vehement about?
Asymmetry,
What was asymmetric?
that one party can behave a certain way, but the other party cannot.
And what is that behavior that's being contrasted?
Atheist,
Wait,
Holland.
can I hear from Barry, please?
Asserting whether something exists or not, denying the existence of something that has been defined, and the definition is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with the definition.
Okay, so you're saying that Colin disagreed with your definition of something. Is that what you're saying?
He denies the existence of that which has been defined.
Okay, but why should you take such vehemence in reaction to that? He
Because
can do
that's
whatever he
the-
wants, right? Doesn't he have free will?
Because that's what the conflict has been about since last October.
No, there has been no conflict, right? I mean, can't he choose to believe what he wants to believe?
Not
Till
if
I
he
have
wants a
better
fair
Hold on,
reason
conversation.
Can I
not to
do this
believe
with
it.
Barry? Can I do this with Barry?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can Colin freely choose what he believes, Barry?
He can, and then I go back to what you said. I don't want to collaborate with you now.
That's fine, but why do you then have to get so vehement?
Because if you're trying to get light through a dark filter, you need a very bright light.
No,
that's
you
bullying.
speak for the
Light,
record,
You
and
need a
Glenn will
very
hear it, I
intense
will hear it.
light to get through a very opaque filter.
Okay, so you would have delivered the message directly to Colin that you don't want to collaborate with him, because the rest of us have gotten that message.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't want to converse with him.
So you can converse with Alex, you can converse with Glenn, me, Stacy. Why do you have to address yourself to Colin?
Yeah, and why so angry?
Colin, can I do this with him?
Because I don't want to waste my time 4 hours, 4 days a week, 2 hours, 4 days a week, where I come here to have a conversation and I get into an adversation. I don't want to have an adversation.
You don't have to respond to Colin.
Then I
Right.
got to sit here and wait for 3.5 hours to have a 30-minute conversation. I don't want
I
to
don't
wait.
think so.
I don't want to wait 75% of the time while there's an adversation going on. Why do you think other people have left?
Oh, because of me. Yes, of
Point
course.
with fair conversation, right? If we try to just adopt some of those agreements,
Here's my
we have
input.
when we kind of turn that dynamic to a
Here's my-
different-
Glenn and I was discussing something. It wasn't Barry. He jumped in to wrestle with the concept. I wasn't actually addressing Barry at all.
Can I interrupt?
So I'm curious, can I ask a question? From what people have seen here, what would you propose? 1 or 2 practices that we adopt that could address this well?
Good question.
Could
I'll
we
go
ask you, wait, could I ask you guys to actually write me a note? What are the 1 or 2 practices you think we should institute so that this could be handled well? I'm really interested in this. I think this is exactly what barn raising is about.
Yeah. Rule 0.
I'm asking it to be written so that you actually consider it carefully before you send it to me, because otherwise it'll be flipped.
I think I already sent it
No.
to you.
I know one thing that I have.
No, this is
considered.
what I've been paying attention to. So yeah, this is what I've been dealing with, and how do I coexist with Barry, respect his knowledge, at the same time limit the noise and frustration I get from him coming my way? He can choose to not be frustrated. That's his choice. I have a long-standing conversation with Glenn about burden of proof, and we were getting close to, I think, the nuance of it. And Barry got off on the concept of becoming and wanted to mean that he just wanted to end the conversation between me and Glenn because
Don't tell me what I want. I'll tell you what I want. Don't put words in my mouth and don't put theories in my mind that are your theories, not mine.
Well, you can always correct me, but you know, it's a pretty intimate group here. So
I have made
we can make
one
some assumptions.
observation, and that is that Barry seems to react to making assumptions about theories of mind, right?
Yes, thank you.
So, and maybe that could be a specific suggestion that we talked about earlier, that to not make assumptions so easily instead we can ask a question.
That's steel manning, which is another tenet of mine.
And that's another
Come on,
tool.
come on.
Yeah.
Thank you, Glenn. Alex has also had his hand up for quite a while.
Yes, I've got a theory of faith and belief in science. It's like when I drop this object, I know it's going to hit the floor because of gravity. I have faith in that belief. And just because I have faith in a belief doesn't mean that somebody can jump on me and beat the shit out of me because of having a faith in something. I have trust also in a fair conversation, because some children are brought up with belief all their life from their parents and the church they go to. They're brought up with it. It's ingrained in them. But other people are brought up atheist, and they didn't believe until later in life when something changed, that something happened in their life, and they changed to become from an atheist who didn't believe in a deity or a supernatural fantasy to somebody who did believe that there's an intelligent designer of some description. Over.
Yeah, we've just fallen
make
out
a
of the
suggestion?
conversation into the details again, Glenn. Remember,
Can
I
I
was
make a
saying we fall out of
suggestion?
the.
Can I make a suggestion?
Go ahead.
To me, this is actually quite important. And I actually think I am very serious about soliciting one or two practice proposals, RFCs, if you may, how-tos, if you may, that we could potentially agree upon, that would allow us to navigate through this better if it ever arises again.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in group learning on this.
Yeah, me
So
too.
I would
I have to
suggest
leave, guys.
before you send it, I would suggest that I post this video, you guys watch this section and really understand where things went off the rails, and then write me a proposal or write us a proposal. I'll put it in Zulip. We can have that conversation in Zulip, okay? And by the way, in Zulip, there's now a stream or a topic. No, there's a topic for every session recently, okay? And so this session has its own topic in Zulip. We can follow up there and nobody else ever has to be bothered by it. So I would suggest that I post this, that you review this, you write a response in that Zulip channel, or even write up a real RFC or a how-to. And that I'm proposing be the topic for next Saturday.
That's
That's
pretty
a
cool.
good topic. Yeah, good topic. I have to leave, guys. It was very interesting.
You're not out of the hot seat yet, Glenn.
Yeah,
We're going to
just
finish
brief.
that conversation.
I think
Wait,
it's a good
I'm going to cut this off
conversation.
before it gets to 4 hours, okay? Because I
Yeah.
really want the transcript for this one.
Yeah, no, we're not going to continue on, but me and Glenn, we're in the middle of getting to the burden of proof, which is, I think, quite a logical,
I think
simple
it's an
thing.
interesting conversation. My first instinct was, why do we need to explain anything at all? But
Okay.
it's a whole big
So
discussion.
unless there's
Racket.
objection, I will post this. You guys hopefully will respond with written responses, and we'll converse next Saturday, hoping to take this incident and make it a learning one. Is that okay?
Yeah, very much
Yeah.
so. And I was prepared for it this time. I wasn't prepared for Barry's
Okay,
emotions.
simple yes would be
before.
fine, Colin, because
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I'm
'Cause
fine with it.
the next thing is I'm not going to listen much the rest of the way, but I'm going to set myself an alarm for 2 minutes prior to the hour. Okay, that's
I
gonna
gotta
alert
go
me.
anyway. I've
And
had
then
enough
1
fun.
minute before the hour, I'm going to do a hard shut off. Okay, I'm not even going to announce it. I'm just going to announce it 1 minute before it gets to 4 o'clock. Actually, it's going to be several minutes because I think I started the recording before the hour.
Why don't you just
Some
stop it and
minutes from
record it?
now.
Yeah, we're pretty well done.
Okay, I can stop it right now, and I can start up another session here if you guys like.
That'd be great. That'd be
Okay,
great.
let me-
And I have
That way
to
I can
leave,
listen to
guys.
Stacy.
I'm gonna
Stacy's got some
stop
good
the
stuff to
recording
say.
now. Stacy, you're brilliant. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.